Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Saturday morning. I'm here right through until 1 o'clock, and there's loads to talk about, especially in regard to the junior doctors' strike, because trust might not recover, doctors have been told. Also, Starmer's migrant plan set to be sunk before it's launched. That's the front page of the Daily Mail. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about Unite suspending Angela Rayner. It's considering their options regarding their ties to Labour over the Birmingham bin strike. We'll talk to a Labour MP about that in just a second, and whether he thinks there is actually going to be some form of proper deterrent. We had a little contretemps on Twitter this week about that. We'll get Jonathan Brash's view on that in a second. Also, the government has got its hat on. The government's gone into meltdown. Ministers are now thinking aircon can be installed at homes, and it could be part of a £7,500 heat pump grant. We'll talk about all of that. We've also got our debate desk, Peter Barnes, and a new panellist, James Nation, OBE. He's the former head of policy for Rishi Sunak. He'll be with us in about 20 minutes' time. We're talking as well about the Birmingham bin strike, as I said. We're hoping to speak to Harvey Proctor a little bit later on as well. Very, very interesting. He was convicted in the 80s of gross indecency, having relations with another man. That doesn't exist anymore as a crime, and yet there is a holiday company, he is saying, that is preventing him going on one of their holidays simply because of that. We'll talk to him a little bit later on, hopefully. Lots to discuss. I want to get your views on all of this as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note 0344 499 1000, and use that number also to send me WhatsApp text messages, and you can also give me a ring on that main number 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with me here on Talk. Well, Jonathan Brash is the Labour MP for Hartlepool, and we were discussing on Twitter this week about the migration problem, and I had said that there wasn't a proper, I thought anyway, I probably should have worded it better, but I said that there wasn't really a proper deterrent, and I'd asked Keir Starmer about this on a couple of occasions. But Jonathan, I'm fascinated to get your view on this. First of all, thanks for the tweet, and it's really great that you're on this morning, because there's loads to discuss in regard to where the government is, where this migration plan is, and so on. So let me just start with the question on that particular aspect and say, with this migration plan from Keir Starmer, do you now think there is a proper deterrent? Maybe you think there was one previously for migrants who get in those boats coming across the channel, landing on our shores?
Well, morning, Peter, first of all.
Morning.
Look, I think the most important thing here is that if you get on a small boat and cross the English Channel, you are not staying in this country. That's the only way to genuinely deter this problem. Now, what this plan seeks to do is return people who come across from France back to France. And if we get to the point where it's abundantly clear that there is no point getting on a small boat and there is no point crossing the channel, then one has to hope that it will stop. And indeed, we didn't used to have a small boat crisis in this country, because previously we had a returns agreement, one that was abandoned by Boris Johnson when he signed his oven-ready Brexit deal.
I think you're talking about the Dublin Convention there. Is that what you're talking about? So the net result of that was only an extra 17 people who went across. So I'm not sure the Dublin Convention actually worked. I also wonder, when you say it's abundantly clear that people who come across in small boats won't stay. Well, at the moment, this is a pilot scheme. I get that. There are only going to be about 50 people a week. But given the numbers coming over, the odds at the moment are about 6% that if you come over today, that you'll be sent back to France.
And evidently that has to be ramped up over time. There's no question.
But it might not be, because Keir Starmer said it's only a pilot scheme.
So it's a pilot, and if it seems to work, and if it works with the French authorities, if it works with the British authorities, then we ramp it up. My view is absolutely clear. Whatever we do, it has to be made clear to anybody getting in a boat: if you arrive in this country, you're not staying in this country. That is the only way to deter this.
And I get that, and I think a lot of our viewers and listeners would agree with that view, Jonathan. Yes. My question is whether this scheme actually does that, because, okay, it's a pilot scheme, but pilot schemes can be scrapped. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But in terms of a deterrent, at the moment it's not. Would you accept that at the moment it's not much of a deterrent?
Well, let's see. I mean, I think there's quite a lot of effort going in from certain quarters to rubbish this deal before it's even started. I think we actually have to see whether it works. No, I'm absolutely clear. If it doesn't work, we have to do something else, because the absolute clear from my perspective, those boat crossings have to stop. And I'm prepared to argue for even more extreme measures if necessary. Things that are happening in places like Germany, where they've effectively just closed the border and said asylum will never be granted to anyone other than...
So why not just do that now then, Jonathan? If that's an effective strategy for Germany, why can't it be an effective strategy for the United Kingdom?
Well, we've got the added complication of a body of water between us and our nearest neighbour that Germany doesn't have on its borders. It's a lot easier to turn someone round when they're trying to cross a land border than a water border. So it is more difficult from our perspective, and we have to have agreements with other people in order to turn people back. But from my perspective, we've got to deal with the French. We have to see whether that works. We have to see whether this can be an effective deterrent. I hope that it is. I imagine everybody hopes that it is, possibly with the exception of certain politicians who are desperately hoping it doesn't work. But from my perspective, if we can get this in place, working, deterring people coming across, then that has to be the goal.
Is this an admission by Keir Starmer that his policy of smashing the gangs hasn't worked?
I think that, and I think we've talked about this previously, Peter, any plan to stop this crisis has got to be multifaceted. There's got to be a deterrent, such as a returns agreement. There's got to be an attack on those smuggling gangs. I think the idea that you don't go after them as the criminals that they are, that you don't try to attack their business model, is wrong. You have to do that as part of the plan, but this is another part. So it's building up a series of measures over time to try and fix this problem. No one solution. This is where I took such issue with the Conservative Party. They came up with the headlines, the Rwanda plan, one thing will solve the whole problem. The real world doesn't work like that. Problems are complex. They require complex answers.
But would you accept that with the scrapping of the Rwanda plan, look, I think it was a flawed plan. I don't think it was ever going to work really properly, but at least it was some form of deterrent. We saw that people were coming to the Republic of Ireland rather than to the UK, for example. That was a form of deterrent that did deter people. I'm not sure in the last year that many people have actually been deterred.
I'm not sure there's any real evidence that the Rwanda plan deterred anybody. It was a folly, as you said. It wasn't going to work. It cost £700 million and they had to pay for volunteers to go. So I think you have to focus on things that work. That didn't work. It didn't deter anybody. And the only sensible thing to do now is to return people when they cross the channel, because that's the only way you're going to get it through to people. That getting in a dinghy is pointless.
How are these people going to be selected? How are they going to decide who the people who are going to be sent back are? There's a lot of detail in this we just don't have. And Keir Starmer was asked about that the other day, and he said, I don't want to get into the operational detail of it. Why not?
Well, I agree that there's a lot of detail that we've yet to see, and the proof will absolutely be in the pudding. And I will reserve judgment as to whether it's a success or not by looking at the numbers as they evolve. But let me be clear, ultimately, it shouldn't be a case of selecting people. Anybody who crosses the channel should be returned. That's the place we've got to get to. You can't do it overnight. This is a pilot, but the place we have to get to is every single person who crosses that channel as an illegal immigrant has to be returned.
But at the same time, we'll take another. But at the same time, we'll take another immigrant back from France, one in, one out. That's the policy. My point with that is, again, a lack of detail over here, which I find very frustrating. If those people from France who are legitimate asylum seekers come over and they say they have links to family, which Keir Starmer didn't mention on Thursday, by the way, will they have to have links to family? Will those families come over in small boats? Are they claiming benefits? Are they paying into the tax system? There's an awful lot of questions that I think people say, yeah, okay, one in, one out. Maybe there are some people, or viewers and listeners, who want to give it a bit of a chance. But actually, I think if your party would give a bit more detail on it, at least we could decide. I mean, yes, you say the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. That's fine. Let's see how it works. But knowing how it will operate, I mean, there's a lot that's been kept from us. And I think a lot of people are quite sceptical about that. Also, the EU doesn't seem to be too upset about this. And if they're happy with it, well, then a lot of our viewers and listeners aren't happy with it. Because if the EU thinks it's a good scheme, generally, a lot of our viewers and listeners and me think it's probably going to be a bad scheme.
Well, I mean, on the first point, I agree with you about the detail. I want the detail as well. And I think that it's really important that we're open and clear about it. And now, clearly, a lot of the details are being worked out.
But why is that, Jonathan? Because, I mean, I know it's not your responsibility, but we're in a situation where you're saying quite reasonably the details are being worked out. But, I mean, surely the details should have been worked out by now and we should know what they are.
Well, I mean, I think that's a perfectly valid opinion. I can't offer you the details here, and I would like to see them as well. But ultimately, and I think this is the thing that your viewers will be most focused on, the success of this scheme will be in those numbers crossing the channel. If they go down, it's worked. If they don't, it hasn't.
Tim's been in touch and says, can you ask Jonathan why the military isn't being used to enforce our borders?
Yeah, I mean, look, if people are really genuinely arguing that if you put your military into the situation, they have to be able to act as the military always does, which is if they need to use force, they would have to. And I'm not convinced using military force against unarmed people in a small boat is quite the way the British state wants to operate.
Would you back the French gendarmerie, for example, who were slashing those boats with Stanley knives? Do you think that was a good idea?
I think stopping the boats in that way is a perfectly reasonable thing to do, and the French authorities, I think, took the right action there, and I would encourage them to do it more. Yeah.
Okay. I want to ask you about a couple of other stories that are around today, Jonathan. Medical leaders warning junior doctors they may never recover the trust of patients if they go on strike again. I think there are an awful lot of people who haven't got a 29.2% pay rise in the last year, haven't got a 22% pay rise in the last year, who look at these junior doctors thinking, what planet are you on here asking for a 29.2% pay rise? But they also see your party and what one of the first things that Wes Streeting did, one of the first things Keir Starmer did, which was give a huge inflation-busting pay rise to junior doctors of 22%. Unsurprisingly, feed a crocodile, the crocodile comes back for more.
I agree with you. I have no idea what planet the doctors are on. I think you look at the figures, Labour, I'm very proud of the fact that whether it was our doctors, nurses, teachers, Labour came into office and reversed a trend of 14 years, which was basically to cut the pay of some of our hardest working public sector workers. That was the right thing to do. I think the doctors threatening to go on strike, having had a 22% pay increase, and then, by the way, over a 5% pay increase this year as well. Mm-hmm. Their pay's gone up something like £9,500 since 2023. I think there are very few people in this country who have experienced a pay rise anything remotely like that. And I agree. And the warning I would give to the BMA is that industrial action only works when you have the public behind you. And I do not think the public are behind this action.
I agree with you. What happens if Labour falls out with the unions? Because we've seen in Birmingham the rubbish is still piling up after 6 months. Unite has suspended Angela Rayner, your deputy leader's membership, considering options regarding their ties. We've seen Sharon Graham, for example, saying that there needs to be value for money for the £1.5 million that they give Labour. What do you make of those comments?
Well, first of all, I think suspending Angela Rayner's membership is a stunt, and a pretty poor one at that. Look, I'm a proud trade unionist myself, and I'm proud of the relationship that the Labour Party has with our trade unions, representing workers right across this country. But it's a partnership. They don't dictate to us. That's not the way it works. We're in government. And I think attacking the Deputy Prime Minister, who has spearheaded the biggest uplift in workers' rights in a generation, is a pretty silly way of going about politics. And for me, I support our trade union movement, representing their workers, but stunts like this I don't think help anybody.
What would you say to Mick in Wallington, who's texted me this morning, says Starmer has no shame, his constant lies don't even impress the unions?
Well, look, I think I don't really know what to say to that, quite frankly. I don't think the Prime Minister constantly lies. I know people will take massive issue with me saying that. I simply don't believe it to be the case. I think the trade unions across the board...
He's U-turned quite a lot, Jonathan. I mean, he says one thing and then he changes his mind.
And let's take on that U-turn thing. In the Westminster bubble, when somebody listens to the facts, sees the reaction of the public not liking something, and therefore changes direction in a way that the public prefer, they call it a U-turn. I just call it common sense.
But why not? I mean, welfare is a key issue, for example. I know you felt very, very strongly about it. You came on this programme to talk about it, Jonathan, and I admire you for doing so. What's interesting in that regard, in regard to welfare, was the fact that they didn't listen to people like you beforehand. They didn't listen to the backbenches who said this is going to go down like a bucket of cold sick. You cannot take these benefits away from people who have them. But went ahead with it anyway. The Prime Minister, it's called it noises off, and people like you were actually noises on very, very soon after that. So why not listen beforehand rather than having to do the U-turn? We've seen that on winter fuel allowances, for example, as well.
Yeah, and on welfare, they made a mistake. and they were wrong. And I voted against the bill this week, as I said I would do on your programme the last time I was here,
that's right.
because I thought it was wrong, and I think they should have listened much earlier. But you know something? If you actually look at that welfare process, the fact that the PIP cuts were abandoned for now and in the future, the fact that universal credit health cuts were abandoned for all current claimants, that happened because your representatives stood up and said, we are not going to support it, we're not going to vote for it. And they had to change their mind, and we forced them to change their mind. That's how Parliament's supposed to work. I was proud of Parliament for its actions in ensuring that those cuts were removed. It's actually a positive. But I agree with you. They made a mistake. They should have listened far earlier.
Just before you go, Jonathan, I wonder if you agree with General Sir Patrick Sanders, the former head of the army, who said we must prepare for war with Russia in the next 5 years.
Yes, I do agree with that. I mean, the reality... Is there
going to be a war with Russia in the next 5 years?
I don't necessarily think there's going to be a war, but I do believe you have to prepare for all eventualities. And it's clear that you have an aggressor in Putin marching across Europe, the first time we've seen war on our continent since 1945. We need to ensure that we are fully prepared. That's exactly what we're doing with the biggest investment in our defensive capabilities since the Cold War. He is right. We have to prepare, and we are.
Okay. Just actually, sorry, one more. I did say that was the last question, but it's not actually, because one of your constituents has actually got in touch. Paul in Hartlepool, you're the MP for Hartlepool. Morning, Peter. Hartlepool is overwhelmed with houses of multiple occupancy and illegal immigrants thanks to this Labour government. My wife cannot walk the streets of Hartlepool safely. How does Mr Brash react to our predicament, says Paul?
Well, I think I would say on the issue of asylum seekers in Hartlepool, actually we've seen numbers come down by nearly 5%. We've actually stopped the procurement of all new asylum accommodation in Hartlepool. I've met with the Home Office, and that's what's been agreed. So we are dealing with it. It is true that the system that we inherited unfairly displaced asylum seekers to particular areas of the country, and Hartlepool has a far higher percentage than even neighbouring local authorities like County Durham. So we have addressed that. We're not procuring any more houses for asylum seekers, and numbers are coming down. On HMOs, I completely agree, and I would like to see councils have more powers to deal with those.
Well, you're the local MP. Can you not make that happen?
Yeah, so I've already met with ministers to talk about, it's a bit of a technical thing, around what's known as an Article 4 directive that allows local authorities to have powers over all HMOs currently.
Are they listening? Are government ministers listening?
Yes, they are. They are listening. And one of the issues with an Article 4 directive is it has to have a 12-month lead-in time. I'd like to see that massively reduced. They are looking at this issue to try and give more powers to local authorities to do it. I think it's the right thing. Some HMOs are good, some, for student accommodation, everything else, but there are far too many of them in Hartlepool, and I want to see them come down.
Jonathan, thank you. That's Jonathan Brash there. He's the MP for Hartlepool, Labour MP, on the show this morning. What do you think of what he had to say? 0344 499 1000. We're going to go to our debate desk in a second. New debate desk panellist James Nesh in OBE. He is the former head of policy at Downing Street for Rishi Sunak. We're also going to be speaking to Peter Barnes, who's on the debate desk as well. Lots to talk about, including that thought that Britain must prepare for war with Russia within the next 5 years. What do you think of that? What do you think of the asylum plan as well? Is it going to work? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
what we're talking about here, 50 a week, something like that.
Yeah, 50 to 50 a week. Yeah.
It's 50 a week. OK. You said today there's about over 700.
We think 700 a day, 2,599 last week. Think about that.
So it's anything up to 1,000 a day, right, at the moment.
Yeah.
Now, how the hell have we got here? Because in 2018, it was around the number of migrants crossing the Channel was 299 for the year.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Dawn in Chelmsford, who says, "Morning, Peter. When will our politicians accept that the UK is full up? We just don't have the resources to accommodate more and more migrants. The plan to swap an illegal migrant with a legal one is just bizarre," says Dawn. Thank you to Sharon as well, who says, "I'm not happy. It's a waste of taxpayers' money. This one in, one out. What on earth is this about?" Well, we'll perhaps get more of an explanation in a second. Alison says, "Let me be clear." Isn't that what Starmer says when he's lying? Penny in Essex says, "Everyone you speak to knows how to stop the large dinghies, which are not small boats. Every government has failed abysmally. Whatever the French think, tow them back. Millions of our money have been totally wasted by giving it to France and Rwanda. We are a laughingstock." Grinning Starmer shaking hands with the bigwigs. "It's so embarrassing. Useless is an understatement," says Penny. And one more from Steve, who says, "Sorry, but the one in, one out pilot is a worse idea than Rwanda. It was never piloted, so your guest needs to reflect on his uninformed position. How much money have we paid France?" Well, the answer is £771 million a year, which is a heck of a lot of money. Let's get into some of this. One person who understands policy is the former head of policy at Downing Street for Rishi Sunak. James Nation, OBE, you're very welcome. Your first appearance on the debate desk. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Peter. Thank you for having me.
And Peter Barnes, familiar to us all,
yes,
of course.
Yes.
Good to see you.
Somewhat of a stalwart these days.
Political strategist.
The only guy that answers the phone.
Just can't get rid of you. Yeah, indeed. We call people a friend of the show if they go and make their own tea in the kitchen. Peter and James, let's get into this. What do you make of the migration plan that Starmer has come up with? You, of course, James, were in Downing Street when Rwanda was a big plan. Did you ever, in your heart of hearts, think it was going to work?
Well, look, I think we did already see a bit of a deterrent effect due to the Rwanda scheme. But let me first take a step back and just try and explain what the government's trying to do. So since they've come in, your viewers will have heard this phrase, smash the gangs, disrupt the business model of these people smugglers who send people across the Channel in the dinghies, which is the footage that we all see, and that people live on the south coast and elsewhere across the country. And fundamentally, the way you do that is you need to dissuade people. You need to make people believe, before they make that crossing, you are not going to be able to have settled status in the UK. And so Rwanda was there as it doesn't matter what country you originate from, there will be capacity and capability for the UK to send you there. And importantly, you are then completely outside of the UK asylum system. Once you've been sent to Rwanda, there was no way for you to apply for asylum in the UK. Now, the flights didn't take off. I take that on board, but there was a sense,
or not, as the case may be.
But indeed, but there was a sense that okay, if I make that crossing, it might not be worth it. And I think from memory, you were already seeing, for example, the Irish government voice concerns about the impact that had. Now, the worry with this is, yes, Keir Starmer has managed to get the French to agree to something they've not agreed to before, which is to take people back. But what is the fundamental problem here? And I really think it's important, and many of your viewers will get this, it's our legal system. It's our capability on being able to deport people who shouldn't be here, or being quite stringent on who should be granted asylum or people who shouldn't.
Was that the main problem for you? Was it not getting people to Rwanda? It was actually the human rights lawyers?
Exactly. It was, and look, there has been you've seen a reputable publication like The Economist this week even start to say the asylum system should be reformed and you should look at agreements like the European Convention on Human Rights. I can say with near certainty there is no way to fix this problem without looking at how our courts and the Strasbourg court behave in these cases. You need the ability to deport people who have no right to be here. Otherwise, the fear is you will just see legal debates, even in relation to this scheme today. I mean, we've seen reporting this morning that the French will have a veto on who we can send back. You can just see it already, that there will be legal cases and there will be exactly the same sort of protracted fight in the courts, which has been our problem in recent years.
So instead of spending £700 million on the system and the Rwanda plan, Why didn't Rishi Sunak just say, we've got to reform the legal system? That's what we need to do. You are the government. You can pass laws.
Yeah, I think there are very hard trade-offs in relation to what I've just mentioned, reforming this Convention on Human Rights. I mean, as you'll know, Peter, it's fundamental to the Good Friday Agreement and so many other bits of our law domestically. I think sometimes these big arguments and reform debates in politics, they just take a while for people to realise. And I think if you think about our experience in government, the Conservative Party was quite divided on this issue, and it took a while to realise that, indeed. And I think now, and I should just end on this point, what surprises me a little bit about the current government strategy is this might be an area where you can use one of Starmer's flaws as an asset. So everyone says, oh, he's a lawyer, he's a lawyer. Why not grip this issue? Why not be the person who actually could engage with reform of some of these conventions, these laws, and actually get in there with foreign leaders to try and change the arrangements? Does he want to? Is the question.
What do you think, Peter?
I'm going to say I completely agree, but on the point of Starmer, that I think it's because he doesn't see it as a problem. I think he sees these.
He spent time this week trying to sort it out with the French.
Only because of poll rating. I don't think he really believes that this is what's needed to happen. I think that's the fundamental flaw of Keir Starmer. But also, I think the way the government has approached this is they think the gangs started the migrant crisis. They seem to focus wholly on this aspect of it, believing that if you take out the gangs, the migrant crisis will stop. That is incorrect. The migrant crisis started a very long time ago because of the customs union, the European Union, and trade policies that kept economically developed, lesser economically developed nations in place. So they suddenly see everything wonderful in the West. Of course, they're going to come here. Everybody would. And unfortunately, we have a government that doesn't see a problem with the kind of the structures of things like the European Convention on Human Rights. They don't really see a problem of that. What I will say, though, is that it's not just about repealing the laws, it's about changing the culture of the legal system itself.
I agree with that.
Because if you just get rid of the European Convention, all the judges will do is find another way to keep people here.
Do you agree with that, James?
I do agree with that, and I'll let your viewers into something here. You're starting to see some signs that I think the government is slowly starting to get this. So they've sent some of their loyal, friendly MPs out to call for the need to reform some of these articles in the Convention on Human Rights. But I think, as Peter says, that is all well and good, but a lot of this comes back to judicial interpretation as well. How our judges, how our courts actually interpret some of these articles and their application. So I see what they're trying to do with the appeal of this deal, albeit I think feedback from some callers earlier suggests maybe the line of one in, one out isn't quite resonating. But if you really want to fix this issue, you have got to get into that legal framework.
Do you think one in, one out as a system will work in some way? Will the system that he has put forward, do you think that is a policy that can work? Especially as people are saying, well, hold on, what actually is this? If we're just getting a legitimate migrant, is this something that is going to be successful? And it's, there are so many people in the country already illegitimately. Are we actually going to get rid of them? Especially if the French have a veto, especially if the human rights lawyers have a veto.
Exactly. Well, look, reasons to be sceptical for the reason that you just outlined, but there's also quite an interesting point here. Why did Emmanuel Macron sign this deal?
That's the point.
Right? So, yes, he might want to help Keir Starmer out, but also recall that actually this is a matter that tends to be dealt with at European Union level. Yep. And it will be really interesting
And there is that question about whether there's actually the point of negotiating just with one country rather than the whole EU.
So let's see what Brussels says.
I couldn't agree more. I have a friend that works at the Commission, and apparently the word apoplectic was used to describe Ursula von der Leyen.
We haven't heard very much from Chesney Hawkes lookalike Ursula von der Leyen recently.
Well, she is the one and only.
Two of them in the same place at the same time.
Yeah, well, that's true. She's the one and only, thank God. But we do.
Well done.
Thank you. I work on these. But I think it is interesting, though, that Macron is willing to separate himself from the European Union like this. I think he always saw himself as the next king of Europe after kind of Brexit happened and the fall of Merkel. I think he saw himself as the next one to take over. That didn't happen, and now he's scrambling for relevancy. I mean, the way he pines after Trump is a little pathetic, but I think he's trying to find his place on the world stage. But it is interesting, now more so than ever, that he's willing to do that. I just wondered if he's bowing to domestic political pressure, given the fact that, you've got the mayor of Calais literally screaming down his neck every other day that, he's capitulating, he's doing nothing, and, that will start to resonate very strongly in a bit of France that is not his big fan.
We're going to continue talking about this after the break, but let me read out a couple more messages, including from Margaret in Tunisia. She says, why are Labour MPs so deluded that they believe everything the Prime Minister does is great? Jonathan Brash, who you spoke to earlier, says, let's give this pilot scheme a go. They cancelled Rwanda before it had even started. Who voted for these people? Well, quite a lot of people, I'm afraid, millions. Gary says, can I point out to your guest earlier on that in 2016 under the Dublin Agreement we actually managed to return fewer than 8% of failed asylum seekers. The application to return the other 92% were all rejected. And Jane says the Prime Minister told us before the election he was scrapping the deterrent. He should have said that his new plan was in place last July. It was a national emergency then. It's worse now. They had 14 years to come up with ideas under the Conservatives, says Jane. Lots more to discuss. Your calls are coming in on this. We'll maybe take a call actually with James and Peter after the break. If you want to get your voice on the air between now and 1 o'clock, give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us. Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Dean in Dagenham, who says, what about the migrants who are already here? It's a fair question. Alison in Billericay says, if he wants to make it abundantly clear that if you come across the channel you can't stay, why did they scrap the law that says they couldn't claim asylum? The laws need to be changed, as do the rules. No housing, no benefits, nothing, and not able to roam the streets. They need to be confined for public safety, says Alison in Billericay. Well, let's take a call now. We're on the debate desk, I should say, with Peter Barnes and James Nation. Peter is, of course, political strategist. James is the former head of policy at Number 10 for Rishi Sunak. Let's speak to Georgina, who's given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Georgina, you're very welcome to the programme. You're on with me and with James and Peter. What are your thoughts on the migration plan?
Well, good morning, everyone. I think the migration plan really is an absolute waste of time. What we need is strong leadership to actually say, no, this is not rocket science, Peter. These people can be stopped by the simple means that when they come over, they are immediately turned about. We don't want them here. It's as simple as that. This government is sticking our country in the melee with unvetted, mostly male, fighting age individuals who are from totally different, polar opposite cultures.
Okay, hold that thought, Georgina. Let me put that to James Nation, former head of policy at Number 10. When people come over to our shores, why can't we just turn them back? Why can't we just say, off you go, back to France?
So that goes back to the legal arrangements I was saying earlier. So I totally agree with Georgina. You need that leadership to actually cut through some of the legal issues here. In simple terms, this is relatively easy to do. There are hard elements that you need to do to address this. One, we will need to have lots more detention capacity to hold people before we deport them. So that is a big practical problem. The second is, what if you've originated from a palpably unsafe country, which is why that was the logic for Rwanda or whatever. But look, you've got to hear the public's frustration on this, and I think you have to grab the mantle and you have to invest the money in that detention capacity and just having a system where you can get people deported faster.
Georgina, does that in any way explain or illustrate the issue for you?
Well, it totally frustrates me because it has been done before. Look at Australia, look at Poland. Look at these countries who have now zero or near to zero illegal migration. You're making it sound like this is a difficult thing to do. It isn't if you actually want to do it. The judicial system needs to be addressed. We need a governing body for this judicial system because they are getting away with blue murder, and we, as the British public, have had enough of this. Enough is enough.
Sorry, Georgina, I have to admit, I did find it rather unsettling when the, I can't remember what her title is now, but the head judge, whatever her name is, I can't remember now.
Lady Chief Justice.
That's the one, thank you very much.
Just call her Sue.
Sue. And she came out and she said she found it very disturbing that Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer were discussing a ruling. Claim. I found that very disturbing, as though she was saying that basically the courts were unquestionable. We've really had this kind of
She also reduced the sentences of Just Stop Oil.
No. That's very true.
Parliament is sovereign. Just got to sort it out.
I completely agree, but I find it very interesting of a court system willing to overstep in a very bold way and make itself very visible in the public, saying you can't criticise us because society might collapse. Well, I hate to break it to you, the way things are going, society's doing a good job at collapsing itself. What I will say, though, Georgina, is unfortunately people are running around saying that this is a very simple thing to do. It isn't, because as much as we don't want the asylum seekers here, most other countries don't want them either. So if you're going to rock them, you put them on a boat and send them back to France, France are going to have a problem with that, or any other country.
Well, with the greatest respect, might I just say, France are being paid fabulously well to deal with this problem. £771 million is not small potatoes.
No, it's a very expensive Stanley knife, I do agree. But again, if you look at Poland as the example you used, they don't have the problem of the maritime laws. They don't have it's a very easy system when it comes to Poland. It's land borders. When you've got a sea border, unfortunately, there's other elements to take into consideration.
Yes. And that's why I come back to, you have to reform this Convention on Human Rights. That was done after the Second World War. You make a very great point about the land border. Think about, Georgina, you'll know, people who are viewing will know, after World War II, that's what you had. You had big movements across land borders. That is not what we are dealing with now.
Go ahead, Georgina.
Can I just interject? This ECHR rule was made after, as you say, World War II. This is over 80 years ago now.
I agree with you.
It's outdated. It needs reviewing, as does the judicial system that is letting these people in for the sake of ridiculous reasons.
And in fairness, Georgina, that is what James and Peter are agreeing with. Georgina, thanks for your thoughts on that. Just on the point you're talking about, James Nation, you're talking about reform of the ECHR, reform of it. Do you think we should withdraw? I mean, how reasonable is reform? I mean, David Cameron talked about reform of the EU, didn't get it, and then there was a referendum. I mean, what do you think about the ECHR? Is it possible?
I am personally quite sceptical on what reform can achieve. You've had processes, I think there was a process known as the Brighton process to reform the ECHR previously. But the reason why I'm quite sceptical, Peter, is, and I should say I'm not a legal expert here, but I think my slight concern is you reform how one of the articles work, you create a whack-a-mole effect where other elements of the convention can then be used to prevent the way in which we behave and ultimately, or interpret, and ultimately then the ability to deport people. So, look, that's what I said earlier. I sort of think Keir Starmer actually should be in quite a good position, if he wants to, of actually seizing a reform agenda here. And again, if his Attorney General wants to as well.
Well,
I'm just a little bit sceptical.
Well, I don't know about you, James, but I think that Richard Hermer is the most dangerous man in government. Peter, what do you think?
He's the puppet master behind all of this, a very terrifying individual. But what I will say is, we have to be very careful about just pulling clean out. We are talking about our legal system has been intertwined with this for a very long time. And
so you don't think we should just withdraw?
No, I don't think it's possible to. And I think anybody running around saying we could just leave tomorrow, I think is actually lying to people. The same way you can't just pull out of the European Union. It's a very complex thing.
I agree with that. So, and I'm not saying pull out tomorrow. And actually, to give Kemi Badenoch and the Tory party some credit, I think taking time to work out what this means for Northern Ireland and the Good Friday Agreement, what this might mean for protection of our veterans, for instance. This is complex stuff. You need a senior, reputable judge or previous judge to look at this. I think they've got Lord Wolfson looking at it. Someone like Jonathan Sumption, who was previously a Supreme Court judge, very measured man, was not afraid to attack the past government I worked for on many issues, now advocates for leaving. And he was quite a prominent Remainer. You need sensible people to look at these issues because it is hard, but we have to do something.
And Jonathan Sumption, no stranger to this station as well, made some very, very good points on lockdown as well. I want to speak to Guy in Hampshire now. Guy, I understand you were a Navy officer, is that correct?
That's correct, yes. Good morning, Peter. Good morning, panel.
Hi, you're on with Peter and James as well. What would you like to say, Guy?
Well, it's about this, you get all these armchair admirals who come on a regular basis saying, all you need to do is get the Navy out, turn the boats round, or pick them up onto the warship and then take them back to France.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just say that, unless I had some kind of gilt-edged, gold-plated, get-out-of-jail-free card, I would potentially refuse to do that, because you'd be asking me to put my ship alongside a flimsy rubber dinghy. Yeah, I know it works in Australia, different types of boats and a different mentality.
That's an important point.
Yeah, but you asked me to put them alongside a flimsy rubber dinghy, someone gets crushed, or someone jumps overboard and dies. At what point does the Nuremberg defence apply to me of I was only following orders?
And that's a fair point, Guy, as well. And I think we do need to keep that in mind, because there are lots of people who say send in the Navy and they can simply do what actually we were talking about a little bit earlier on with Jonathan Brash, where he said, well, if you use lethal force, for example, is that fair? And we're seeing as well a story we talk about in this network fairly often in regard to veterans being prosecuted for what happened many years ago, some of whom did.
Well, that's exactly. Yeah. If you don't mind, that's exactly the sort of add-on points I was going to make. Because the other thing is okay, we lift them off the rubber dinghy and stick them on the warship. A warship is British sovereign territory, so they've effectively landed in Britain.
That's also a very good point. Guys, stay where you are just for a second. I'm going to get the views of Peter and James, and then I'm going to come back to you. So just hold fire for a second. Peter, what do you make of what Guy said there?
I want to thank Guy for saying that, because I'm sick to death of people running around thinking you could just put the Navy in the channel and that will solve all the problems. It won't. Because you then have the problem of, well, you're going to put a Navy vessel, a military vessel, into a NATO ally territory waters, and do you think they're just going to allow that to happen? At what point do we suddenly think that the French might say, do you know what, maybe don't bring your warship into our waters? This is the thing when people keep saying use the Navy. Yes, they're a very effective force, but it is a military operation to which you're now escalating it to. That changes a lot of things, and I'm not very comfortable with the fact that you could end up potentially with a standoff. And it's then you've got to start saying, well, when do you say shoot and when do you say retreat? That is the reality of what many people are advocating for at the nth degree. I hope it never gets that far, but we have to be real that when you put a military vessel through territory, other nations' waters, it is not a friendly act.
It's a reminder that there are no simplistic options, to your point earlier. And look, I think at this point, Peter, we should just, and prompted by what Guy said, this is an immensely perilous journey which these people are taking. And the human tragedy of the crossings is just something that I feel always should be emphasised in this debate. And that is why you want to break this vile trade. But I agree, the operational ability of the Navy to do this or to accept doing it is something that is often flippantly ignored. We come back to, once again, what is the fundamental issue here. The fundamental issue is people feeling like if they make the journey, get into the UK, they will have a chance to benefit, stay, take advantage of all the amenities that we were mentioning earlier. You need to break that link. You need to have a strong legal system in place that breaks that link.
Also repeal the kind of pull factors. That seems to be the major thing that many European nations are even telling us that the reason they're coming here is because we're rolling out the red carpet. We've got to stop doing that.
Guy, what do you make of what Peter and James have been saying there?
With just about everything they've just said, I think it's the pull factors, and if you make it nice to come here, spookily enough, people want to come here.
Unsurprisingly, people want to come.
Yeah, and this, if you don't mind, it's slightly off topic, but it's a similar thing.
Go for it.
If you go back to the Bryce Norton incident, let's just assume that an MGS guard. Ministry of Defence guard had those people in their sights.
We just have to be really careful with this guy because there are criminal charges.
Appreciate that. I'm not going to go that way. But let's say he had them in the sights of the rifle and shot one. Can you imagine what will be happening now? And that links in with because all they're armed with is paint, is human rights, this, that, and the other. That guy would be droned out, which links into the the Dorset policeman who is being sacked because he swore at someone because he had a knife, and as you mentioned right at the beginning, the vets of Northern Ireland, 30 years down the line are now being chased through the court.
Yeah, I mean,
why do you keep being chased through the courts in 30 years? Because I accidentally killed someone. yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
You get the idea.
I know exactly what you mean. Guy, thanks for your thoughts. I think James Nation wants to come back on one of them.
I think, Guy, let's not get into the particularities there, Guy, but I respect what you're raising. I just think there's a bigger point here, which is we unfortunately have big trust issues in our society.
Huge, yeah.
For big institutions. And I think we mentioned earlier some of the challenges for the judiciary. Obviously...
But do you accept, James, as well, that the trust issue is to do with politicians as well? It's to do with the politician you work for. It's to do with Rishi Sunak in part.
Totally. The point I was going to make is you're absolutely right. Politicians have taken a lot of cop in recent years and at the moment, and I get all of that. I do think, though, there is a need for other institutions, everyone involved in kind of the implementation of our framework, the governing of our framework in this country, to just realise there is a bit of a disconnect at the moment with what the public expects.
More than a bit.
More than a bit. And if we don't fix that, then I think it's
Can
concerning.
you get that back? Is it possible to get trust in politicians back?
I don't think it's possible. I think I believe more in atonement than apologies. So I think one thing the public want more now so than ever is action.
Yeah,
I think
show us by your deeds. Yeah,
yes, just literally do something. I feel at the moment that the government is being impacted, not making an impact. And I think that is really being felt with this kind of rather sense of betrayal that we keep hearing left, right and centre across the political spectrum.
I always wonder with Starmer, I wondered this with Sunak as well. Is he leading or is he letting the job happen to him?
I think he's letting the job happen to him. And I think he's doing it, he's governing in that way, unfortunately, when the public are impatient, and you have to be able to tell a broader story. And then I think just to link your points together, when you remember, people in their daily lives, as your viewers will know, don't really, politics happens over there. I don't want it. I don't want it in my life all that much. But when it is, I want to notice what my leader is doing and to feel it. And I think the challenge for the government is: does this one in, one out 50 migrants that the French could veto really cut through? Yeah. You need to. It's something where you've got to be like, oh, okay, that makes sense to me. That's going to make a difference.
I think it's really difficult with the small boats crisis because it's a very visible thing. Yeah. You can see the boats, you can see the people, and also you can feel it in your neighbourhood and your community of the stresses and the strains because everybody's experiencing. It's a really difficult issue for any government to get to grips with, but they've got to lead. They've got to do something. Yeah.
Thanks to our callers Georgina and Guy in Hampshire as well. Thank you to you. Quite a few questions actually coming in. We'll wait a second and ask those after the break. Quite a number of people have some thoughts for Peter and for James, mainly on this asylum issue. We'll talk about some other stories as well, about whether, talking about trust, whether they can recover with the junior doctors, for example. I say just pipe down, get on with your work, take your 22% pay rise and shut up. We'll find out what James and Peter think about that in just a second. Back in the debate desk here on Talk.
What we're talking about here, 50 a week, something like that.
Yeah, 50 is 50 a week. Yeah.
It's 50 a week. Okay, you said today there's about over 700.
We think 700 a day, 2,599 last week. Think about that.
So it's anything up to 1,000 a day, right, at the moment. Yeah. Now, how the hell have we got here? Because in 2018, it was around the number of migrants crossing the Channel was 299 for the year.
Sharon says, with this government, why is it always about keeping other countries happy instead of keeping the British people happy? Why does this government not want us to be happy? Bill in Thailand says, morning Peter, morning Bill, great that you're listening in Thailand. So Starmer will send back 50 a week. Just take a step back. There are more than 50 a week coming in on lorries. No thought, no plan, no idea. Great show. Well, actually, the other day, I think it was on Friday, Thursday, the number coming in was something like 537 people. So that would take 11 weeks to send them back, even if they would be sent back. And Leslie says, look, there are just so many questions. She agrees with me that there's so many questions on this. When does this groundbreaking deal come into force? Days, weeks, months, years? And one question actually from Jason in Bristol to Peter, and we'll just get a final word on this, I think, from Peter and from James. Morning, Peter. Great show. Jason in Bristol here. Could you ask your guests a simple question? How come the European countries can ignore the ECHR, but we don't? I mean, that's a fair point. Also, David Cameron did ignore rulings in regard to prisoners voting, for example.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair point, and I think it comes back to the interpretation that our courts make of the ECHR laws as well, which I think comes back to this debate over, can you just leave it at reform, or do you need to ultimately leave as well?
Yeah, I think the problem with reform is the guy in charge of it has basically said reform isn't even possible. So I think we've got a real problem there politically. But I do agree that it does seem to be that we always seem to be pleasing other countries. But I would remind people that there is a very real chance that if we start dumping people on their shores, there's nothing to stop them doing it to us.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And also, a lack of reform could lead to a lot more reform. Reform UK could well seize the opportunity there. We're going to leave the migration debate because we've been talking about it for over half an hour, but please do keep your calls, text, tweets, voice notes, everything coming in, and we will continue talking about it. In fact, we're going to talk about this issue again in a few minutes with Amar Johal, who's talked to us about this shambles, and he says that Starmer's migrant deal is just a sticking plaster. We'll talk to him in a second, but in the last 5 minutes with James and Peter, I just want to rattle through three issues. Let's have short answers and make sure we can get through them. Doctors striking. Peter Barnes.
Get back to work. Daphne Austin, Susan Evans, John Doyle. 3 people who died as a result of the last doctor strike. What happened to do no harm? Get back to work. Take it to 22% back pay that nobody else seems to have been entitled to, and just be quiet, please, because the public is losing sympathy with you very quickly, and the public that's not on our side is a big problem.
Wes Streeting, the current health secretary, said that because the strikes and the talks broke down to such a degree under the government you were part of, James Nation, that they had to do something.
Well, actually, in our last year in office, we did manage to reach agreements with a lot of the NHS workforces, bearing in mind that I think a lot of them were probably thinking this lot aren't going to be around for too much longer, and then we'll go and negotiate with the Labour government. So this is hard graft that the government has to do, because it has to be aware of the public finances and taxpayer money, and that's why you do have to turn around and say no eventually. And I think part of the problem here maybe is that you've got the BMA and possibly some others as well just testing the limits, and so I think actually Wes Streeting holding the line, and in fairness marshalling a lot of prominent medical figures this morning to say no, what are you doing?
And Professor Sir Robert Winston, for example, Lord Winston I should say, the genetics, the reproductive expert, has actually left the BMA. I learned a lot from his BBC series, The Human Body.
Great radio voice.
It also happened when I was about 14, and there are a few questions I had at that stage, which he answered. Now, Russia, should we prepare for war?
We already are at war. I don't understand why everybody's surprised by this. We have been for a long time. It's about time that we realised this. Just because a war isn't happening with ground troops and all the rest, it doesn't mean that we're not at war. We are facing cyber attacks, we're facing disinformation campaigns, we're facing lots of attacks in lots of different ways. It's about time that we actually got in the fight. The West has retreated far too long. And yes, it's time we grow up.
Brief answer from James Nation, because I definitely want to talk about Jaffa Cakes. Should we prepare for war with Russia?
Yes, we should, in the sense that I think your point is absolutely right. Peter, that we've got to be prepared for a whole of society approach. What does that mean? It means stop thinking about things in conventional terms. I mean, I've seen the stories this morning talking about bunkers or whatever else, reversing armed forces cuts, and I get all of that. But this is much more about understanding that there are quite sophisticated ways in which foreign actors can hit us these days, and I think it's about being aware of that, about the implications for our infrastructure and in cyberspace as well.
James Nation, I know that a very senior figure in Rishi Sunak's Downing Street referred to you as their chief nerd, and I want you to.
I can say that group of people.
I want you to explain. I want you to, your chief nerd, Rishi Sunak's chief nerd, to explain to us why the London Biscuit Museum has been forced to pull the Jaffa Cake exhibit after a backlash from McVitie's.
I love this because it goes to what we were saying earlier about a classic British implementation of the law once it's been decided upon. So this goes back to the wide-ranging debate in our tax system over whether a Jaffa Cake is a biscuit or a cake. Classified as a cake for VAT purposes, I think due to a temperature rule. And here you've got McVitie saying that therefore it is wrong for the Jaffa Cake to be given prominent position in a biscuit exhibition. And may I just say for your viewers, I think this is a further illustration about some of the difficulties in our tax code, Peter, which again is perhaps another headache for Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor at the moment.
However, I find it delightfully British. I think it's wonderful that every A-level student of the law is going, I know about this story.
1991
literally, as soon as we came out, I said, I remember studying this. But it's delightfully British. It just shows the complexity and the nonsense that is our tax system, and it needs complete simplification.
I also love the word backlash in the headline, as if, it can be used for all sorts of different
I feel like
purposes.
they missed total eclipse.
Very good, very good.
We're all of a certain age.
Thank you all very, very much. That's Peter Barnes, the political strategist, and James Nation, OBE, former head of policy for Rishi Sunak in Downing Street. Great to have you both on the debate desk. James, your first, hopefully not your last appearance on the debate desk. Lots more to discuss. We'll be discussing migration in more detail coming up. We'll take your calls as well if you want to make sure you get on between now and 1 o'clock. The number 0344 499 1000. Stay with us. Well, a very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. I'm here right through until 1 o'clock today, and indeed tomorrow between 10 and 1. Loads to discuss, including whether Keir Starmer's immigration scheme that he announced this week is actually falling apart at the seams before it even starts. We'll get your views on that, as well as Amar Johal, who's a writer for The Spectator. He is a former government lawyer specialising in constitutional and regulatory law. We'll talk to him in just a second. We'll also talk about Angela Rayner, the bin strike in Birmingham. If you're in Birmingham, I'd love to hear from you. Those bins and indeed bin bags and rubbish still piling up. We'll talk as well to Harvey Proctor a little bit later on, the former Conservative politician who has been banned from TUI, which is of course the tour operator, because of a historical conviction for gay sex. Now that's something that's obviously not illegal anymore. It was at the time, but they're saying he has a sex crimes conviction, therefore he can't travel on their company aircraft. Well, we will get his view on this. We've asked TUI for a statement as well. It's something that I think is disgraceful. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Let me know your thoughts on all of the issues we're talking about today, junior doctor strikes as well, and also whether we need to be prepared for war with Russia within 5 years. That's what the former head of the army says. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, you can send me a voice note or a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the same number, which is 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock, so stay with me here on Talk. Dawn in Chelmsford says, morning Peter, when will our politicians just accept that the UK is full up? We just don't have the resources to accommodate more and more migrants. The plan to swap an illegal immigrant with a legal one is just bizarre. Cardi P says, Neil, for me this is the biggest issue with the returns agreement. We take a replacement asylum seeker from France and then we try to return one from the UK. I think at this point is where the issues will arise, that this is where lefty lawyers will get involved. So at that point we'll have 1 in but 0 out. Well, how will the scheme work? Will it work, or is it just a sticking plaster? Fascinating article in The Spectator by Amar Johal, who has written it. He is also a former government lawyer specialising in constitutional, Brexit, EU and regulatory law, and a reservist in the British Army. He knows of what he speaks. Amar, great to have you in the studio. How are you this morning?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Peter.
The headline in this article, Starmer's migrant deal is just a sticking plaster. For people who haven't had the benefit of reading it as I have, why?
So it is trying to replicate the ineffective arrangements that we had when we were an EU member state under the Dublin arrangement. And not only did that not work, it doesn't fix what some of the people writing in were pointing out, that we have deep problems with how the domestic immigration and asylum system works. So it's going to lead to the usual stream of endless appeals. Now, the international side of things is important, but it's more important in terms of fixing our relationship with the ECHR. The EU immigration and asylum system is not terribly effective. It wasn't when we were in a member state, and replicating that is likely to be a sticking plaster without looking at the domestic context.
So there's loads I want to get into in that answer. I could basically say every single clause of that will be what we'll talk about in the next sort of 10 minutes or so. Amar, just on the Dublin Convention, we hear this an awful lot. A lot of people talk about it. Just for people who might not know what that is, what was the system previously when we were in the EU for returns? And I mean, as you point out very well in your article, it didn't really work for us anyway. Just explain that system if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so this has been a pretty toxic topic and conversation at EU level for years. The premise behind the Dublin regulation is that in most cases the country where an illegal entrant has arrived should be responsible for processing their asylum claim. And then off the back of that, member states where this individual has ended up, who can prove that, for example, they entered the EU in Greece or Italy, can transfer them back to Greece and Italy. Now, one of the fundamental problems with that is they can come straight back to the UK or France. But another problem is that other member states weren't great. We were faithfully, as ever, complying with this regime. So we received a lot of transfer requests and we complied with that. When we tried to transfer people back, not so much cooperation. So we ended up with this system by the end of our membership, so the late 2010s, where we are taking more migrants than we are sending back.
So this was clearly a big problem, and it does seem to many of our viewers, listeners, and to me actually, that Starmer, who of course campaigned for a second referendum, wants a more EU-style system. Do you think that's a fair assessment? It
is a fair assessment. It's also not that different to the Conservatives in that, because politicians have lacked moral courage to do what's necessary in terms of leaving the ECHR and repealing the Human Rights Act and changing our domestic system to allow more easy transfers to third countries or to a person's country of origin. What they've tried to do is replicate this failed EU system, which is a topic of huge contention even between current EU member states, which is why so many of them are unhappy with the UK trying to replicate some element of it behind their back.
So do you think that we should withdraw completely from the ECHR?
Yes.
Why?
So,
and is that practical?
Yes. Well, those are probably topics for an hour-long discussion. But so in the first instance, the ECHR makes it very difficult to enforce your borders, and in particular to deport anyone, or to even stop migrants arriving in the first place. In the UK's context, that's in dinghies, small boats at the moment across the English Channel. Now, we also have a problem with how we've implemented the ECHR in British law, which is a part of the focus of the article, and so there are ways to ameliorate, make the situation better by repealing the Human Rights Act and staying a member of the ECHR. But broadly, I would say both need to go, and even that is not even sufficient to fix our problems, some of which relate to domestic law, which predated all of this.
How much of this is about judicial activism as well, about judges interpreting the law in the ways that are most helpful to asylum seekers or to people who want to come to this country who are migrants for other reasons?
I think that's a tricky question. I think judges have been encouraged into mission creep and huge mission creep, and actually into judicial lawmaking, which is not their job. They should be interpreting clear rules on immigration and asylum, which Parliament and the ECHR has not given them for years. So they put into a situation where there are many routes to give someone who should not have a right to remain in the UK a right to remain in the UK, and therefore they do in a lot of cases. I would question their intentions only in a small number of instances, the intentions of judges.
Okay. In regard to what you're talking about here, in regard to what Starmer is saying, there's a lot of detail we just don't have.
Correct.
How do you think it can work, or how do you think it will work practically? And just in terms of what you understand to be the scheme, I think there's still a number of people, and I totally get this because I'm slightly in this position myself, who are saying, well, we'll still have the same number of people in the country with one in, one out. Also, there are many ways in which people can appeal to not be sent back to France, for example. So do you see the system working in any way? Do you see it practically working in any way?
So look, I welcome any sort of deterrent, and that was a lot of the justification from the Conservatives for a Rwanda scheme. Expensive, ineffective, but it will deter some people from making the journey. That is welcome, but this is not a very good scheme or idea. Now, how I imagine, we don't, as you said, Peter, we don't have any details. The government, whilst briefing out numbers, Yvette Cooper has been very clear not to give numbers because they know they're probably not going to meet that. And so what we're going to end up with is a system where we comply with our end of the deal, where we take people directly.
And that's often the way, isn't it?
It's often the way from France. And people who we're trying to return to France use these domestic grounds of challenge or challenge it in the domestic courts in a way that frustrates their deportation. So there may be some small, difficult to quantify deterrent effect of all of this, but in terms of operationally, it is very unlikely to work. Now, I don't think the EU is going to quash it. That's probably a slightly different question. I think it will go ahead.
Why not?
So, firstly, as a sort of matter of EU law, it's a mixed competency. It's shared between member states and the Commission to act at a European level. And so broadly, how you deal with nationals of third countries that arrive in an EU member state is up to those countries. They have restrictions how they deal with other EU citizens from other EU countries. But so also, in addition to the fact that the Commission doesn't have a legal route to stop it, and there's lots of these other deals, for example, Italy and Tunisia or Italy and Albania, they also recognise it's a very sensitive area, so they haven't tried to police it very hard because there's already a lot of non-compliance with existing EU law.
So they don't want to push it, essentially?
Basically, so
there
Hungary,
are many other countries though that have that within the EU, and we're not within the EU, of course, after Brexit. There are many EU countries that have a much harsher regime. Yeah. Germany, for example, could we just do that? Could France just do that? I mean, if the EU aren't going to come down on these EU countries, why don't we? I mean, you understand this law backwards. Within the confines of the law, is there more that we could do even without an agreement with France?
Yes, so it's this sliding scale of political will of politicians, which, as people writing out, has failed them for years on this. There are many things we can do in domestic law to either make returns easier or make our system less generous, and that is maybe the German-French approach. Hungary has also taken a very aggressive approach within the confines of EU law. There is something that's gone wrong within the implementation of the Human Rights Act, within the ECHR law, which it's peculiar to how we've done it in England.
Why has that happened, do you think?
I think it's a culture of dotting the I's, crossing the T's, complying with every possible interpretation of very expansive laws. While as you see, I don't want to cast dispersions, but France and Italy frequently get around the same restrictions ECHR level, so the court in Strasbourg, that we faithfully comply with by just ignoring them periodically.
And we have ignored Strasbourg previously, for example, on prisoner voting.
Yes.
David Cameron did that. So there isn't really a consequence, is there, if you ignore these laws? So we're being too assiduous, we're being too compliant with European law in regard to the ECHR, you would argue, I would imagine.
Yes, yeah, you're spot on, Peter. As a premise of the Human Rights Act, basically gold plates the ECHR, makes it apply supranationally and makes it supreme to other laws created by Parliament in a way that, as far as I'm aware, other European countries
So we could repeal that in theory?
Yeah. I also think any membership of the ECHR is going to make comprehensively tackling this problem difficult. But if there's the moral courage to go halfway,
so even
I think I'd welcome that.
Even within the ECHR, you advocate withdrawing from it, but even within it, there could be, if the political will was there, we could sort this out by ourselves without agreements with other countries necessarily, just by implementing the law we already have in a slightly different way.
Correct. Yes.
Wow. Okay, I've never heard that before.
The systems, they're very entangled. They're entangled in a way which, using that sticker plaster analogy, politicians have tinkered with for years. I think we've reached the point where more radical solutions are needed, and I bet viewers would 100% agree on that.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. I'm sure they would. Essentially, most problems in our country are down to three people: Chris Grayling, George Osborne, or Tony Blair. This strikes me as a Tony Blair one.
Yes, yeah, spot on.
Okay, all right.
100% agreement on that. Look, even towards the end of Tony Blair's premiership, so late 2005, 2006, there's a lot of internal memos that we've now started to see released complaining about the effects of the Human Rights Act. So there's a degree to which New Labour didn't realise what they were doing, and once Pandora's box was open, they were desperate to close it, but they didn't want to look like hypocrites. And the same way that the Conservatives, during those 14 years, bought into the narrative of, well, we can't fundamentally change this, we have to tinker with the existing system.
Yeah. Listen, it's fascinating to talk to you. I hope it's not our last conversation. Thank you, Amar Johal, who's a writer for The Spectator. He's also a former government lawyer specialising in constitutional, Brexit, EU and regulatory law, and also a reservist in the British Army. How much time does that take up, being a reservist in the British Army?
It's 28 days.
Right, okay, it's a lot.
A year. Yeah, but it's important.
And what do you do? Where do you go? In as much as you can say.
Yeah, I'm in an infantry regiment.
Cool. Okay. Do you enjoy it?
Yeah, it's great.
You'd recommend it?
It's different from my day job. Get out and about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Great stuff. Okay, well, thank you for serving our country. Lots to discuss in regard to what Amar said there. Thank you to everybody who has been in touch. Sean says, I want military force to stop the invasion. We are supposed to be able to defend ourselves, our women and our children. Stephen Ipswich says, Jonathan Brash, like the rest of the government, are sadly deluded. If they honestly believe this rubbish coming out of Starmer and Macron's mouth, they're both a joke and not fit for office. Lots coming in as well on what our debate desk panellists said and what Amar said as well. John in Rugby says, freeze the bank accounts of these greed-driven junior doctors until they decide to go back to work to do the job they chose to do, for which they're very well paid. Oh yeah, and ban the BMA, says John in Rugby. I don't think we should ban the BMA, but I do think we should have a very strong argument with them as to why those rises are simply not justified. Keep your questions and voice notes and calls coming in. We've got a load of voice notes let out. Tech Up Dave has been a busy boy, and we will play some of those out in just a minute. Stay with us here on Talk.
The other thing that concerns me about that, the narrative that I'm talking about now is one that you will agree with, I'm sure, and most people will, but it has, with the rise, and this isn't a criticism of reform, they've done incredibly well in sort of building the momentum that they have, but this unworkable scheme that they've got, it's very seductive, very attractive idea, 4-point plan for stopping the boats, does not survive contact with political, diplomatic, legal, or operational reality.
Carl is in Pinner and has given me a call on 0344 499 1000. Carl, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, good morning. Yeah, what I'd like to say is Starmer had the opportunity when Macron was at number 10 with him. Why didn't he say, look, we need to take all of them back every day for a month? Give us permission to pick them up in our, boats.
Yep.
Take them back to a French port. Let us do it for a month to see if it'll stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
that would have stopped it. He had the opportunity with Macron in his room to say, look, we need to take them back, all of them back for a month.
But then wouldn't they just wait for a month and then make the voyage after that time, Carl?
If that happened again, say, right, we need to do it for another month. That's the only way you're going to stop it, Peter.
Yeah, I just don't think the French would agree to that, though. What's in it for them?
That's the problem. The French want rid of them. The French want them to come here. They've got no intention of stopping it. None at all.
Do you think there's any way around this, Carl? You've listened to the show today and you've heard a lot of different views from Amar, from James Nation, from Peter Barnes, from me, from Jonathan Brash. Do you think there's any way to solve this that is a reasonable way to solve it?
Yeah, we should say to Macron, right, we're revoking all your French fishing licences until the boats stop. Yeah. We need a leader with a spine, and we haven't got one with Starmer.
I don't even think it's a leader with a spine. I just think it's a leader. It's just I just don't feel that Starmer is leading us at all, Carl, or he's leading us certainly in a direction that seems to be very spineless to continue what you're saying. It just doesn't he doesn't seem to want to solve this.
Peter, in my 73 years, this is the very worst government I've ever known.
Wow.
The worst. But he can stop if Starmer really wanted to. He could stop them boats this week.
Yeah.
Revoke all the French fishing licences, and every boat that got a licence goes. That's all he's got to do.
Yeah. Okay.
The French fishermen would stop the boats themselves.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, actually. Carl, thanks for your thoughts. I appreciate them. That's Carl in Pinner there. Thank you to Nick in Hertfordshire. He says all illegal migrants crossing the Channel should be put in hostel-style accommodation and all tagged. This would stop illegal employment and put off thousands. No phones, healthcare, dentistry and benefits should not be able to be claimed for until you have contributed to their tax system for a minimum of 10 years, standard for anyone coming here, legal or illegal. Australia seem to manage. I couldn't just rock up there, says Nick. You're right, and neither could I. Diane says the EU should be harder at the external border like Greece and Italy. Schengen should be for EU residents only. Another person says, great show. Why couldn't Starmer say to Macron, you have 48 hours, Britain is closed, you drag the dinghies back to your shores before reaching the English Channel, slash the dinghies, hammer the engines. If not, we want a full refund plus all their fishing rights are revoked. Then it's up to them to close their borders. We are not part of the EU anymore. He needs to stand up. Kelvin in Macclesfield. Morning, Peter. Now, because other countries are telling us to stop migrants' benefits in hotels and houses, your guest now believes it. This country has been telling them for years to stop the pull factors. Now, will we get an apology? Will they listen to us? Stop the pull factors, stop the hotels and benefits. That's all that will take to stop them coming. If they do get here, if they have no ID, send them back to the dinghy they got here in. If it was safe enough to get here, it's safe enough to go back. And once they enter the French territory, will they not take them in? If not, why not, says Kelvin. It's a very, very good point. Lots of people getting in touch, including Rich, who has sent me a voice note. This is what Rich has to say.
Morning, Peter. Great show. This won't work. The smash the gangs was just a slogan, as Rishi Sunak said. Basically, one in, one out. By any calculations, if you take one away, you get another one back. Plus the fact, the ones that are sent back will just get back on the boat and come over again. So, law of averages, they're going to get here anyway. The only scheme that would have ever worked was the Rwanda scheme. You have to get these people and process them outside the UK. It'll stop in a matter of weeks. Bye.
Thank you for your thoughts there, Rich. Appreciate that. Kelvin's been in touch.
Morning, Peter. The Rwanda plan did work, because if you remember, when the Rwanda plan was brought in, they were all waiting in Calais. They wouldn't come over because they all said, oh, we're not going over, we're waiting for Labour to get in. And then once Labour got in, they flooded us, they're thick as a brick, all of them. Captain Chaos, he hasn't got a clue, and there is only one way of stopping them from coming over and putting them off. And that is, like everybody says, stop all the benefits, stop giving them hotels, stop giving them houses, don't give them anything at all. The other countries don't give them anything, so why should we? I know it's all right, the other countries saying, well, you're in the ECHR, you've got to abide by the rules. They don't, so why should we? Simple. Stop everything, stop them from coming. That'll put them off. Bye.
Kelvin, thanks for your thoughts there. Lenny's in Ashford. Lenny, what do you make of this?
Well, first of all, I must congratulate you on that young lady who was talking on your show. What a lovely lady with talk and explained a lot of things that I did not understand. And I would like to thank her very much.
Who was that? Sorry, the guest we just had on a minute ago.
Yes.
Oh, that's a man, I'm afraid. That's Amar Johal. Yeah, that's a guy. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and she was brilliant.
It's a man. It's a man. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. No problem, Lenny. But you learned as.
I do wear hearing aids, so.
No problem at all.
I don't mean to.
Not at all. Not at all, Lenny. No problem at all. Listen, if you have hearing issues, no problem whatsoever. And listen, I learned an awful lot from it as well, Lenny. I felt a lot more informed. But it's a big, big issue, isn't it?
It is, and I think this is. I truly believe that Starmer hasn't got no intention of stopping the boats, and all this is another delaying tactic. So they'll be crossing the channel for months and months to come, until he thinks of another air braid scheme to delay it again. Starmer has not done anything positive.
Can you not think of a single thing that's positive that he's done in the last year, Lenny?
No, well, I look at Starmer. He lives in a world of his own, and he's got no foresight whatsoever. That's why he has so many U-turns, because he lives in a stupid world and he cannot see the future until he does something and it's too late. and he certainly doesn't qualify to be our Prime Minister. We are in trouble.
OK, Lenny, thanks for your thoughts. Let's go to Khaled in Leicester, who's given me a ring as well on 0344 499 1000. Khaled, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, Peter. I want to say, look, I think we should accommodate for people coming over. I think, in fact, we should give them 3/4 of the land of UK. Let them take over 3/4 of the land. Let them stay here, and let them dictate to us whatever 25% of the land that we have, where we can go, where we can't go. And I know, Peter, you agree with me.
No, I don't actually. Are you just being deliberately controversial, Khaled?
I'm not being controversial.
I think that's a pretty controversial opinion. You're saying people should come over here and take over 3/4 of the land.
Yes, of course.
Why? Why do you believe that?
Why? Because I think this is what the UK government and yourselves and many other people believe. Because this is what we agree to what Israel is doing to the Gazan population and to the Palestinian population. No, it's not. You don't have to huff and how. This is the reality, Peter. That you have to be consistent in condemnation, consistent empathy. But when it comes to Palestinians, it doesn't matter. Let them take over everything. But when it comes to us, no, we can't let anybody here. This is preposterous. This doesn't wash anymore.
Khaled, Peter. The two situations are completely different.
They're not different.
They are completely different, Khaled.
They are human beings as well. They have lives. They care about.
Of course they do. Of course they do. And I understand that. And people have lives. There is no people coming here illegally, coming and taking over the land. I mean, that's just an absurd suggestion.
Yeah, but that was illegal. But what did they do in 1948, Peter, in Israel?
Khaled, I just don't have the energy for this conversation because you're just so completely wrong.
I'm not wrong. Peter. The whole world knows. 99% of the world knows.
99% of the world. Okay. Well, I think that's a world you live in that most sensible people don't. Khaled, thanks for your thoughts. We're not going to agree. Gary's been in touch and says we can talk about how to stop these illegal boat crossings in the Channel until the cows come home. But the bottom line is that nobody in Europe wants these people in their own country any more than we want them here. So they have a vested interest in passing the problem on to somebody else, which is why it's absolute folly to think that we can do a deal with Macron to stop them coming. This one-in, one-out policy is just window dressing, a PR exercise to keep the money flowing from the UK to France and the migrants flowing from France to the UK, always giving the impression that he wants to help us stop them. He doesn't. Sue VS says the answer is to do what Australia did. We have few islands, and instead of giving money to the French and hoteliers, build Nightingale-style detention centres. Also make it clear that not one illegal will be given British citizenship. And David says, good morning, Peter. Good morning, David. The French seem to have an entirely different view to the ECHR, even though they are signatories, and that is a very, very fair point. We're going to continue this conversation. If you want to talk about it, you give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Maybe you agree with Khaled, maybe you think he thought he was making perfectly fair points. I thought they were ludicrous points. But anyway, if you disagree with me, that's okay, because on this show we disagree without being disagreeable. There's no point shouting at Khaled, there's no point saying, there's no point barracking him and shouting at him. I simply told him he was wrong. We disagreed agreeably, and we're going to move on. We're also going to talk about Angela Rayner being suspended from the Labour Union, Unite, in regard to bin strike chaos. If you're in Birmingham, I'd love to hear from you. What has it been like over the past 6 months having these bin strikes and having your rubbish pile up? We're going to talk to the Director of Operations at Clean Up Britain and also the leader of the Conservative group in Birmingham City Council. Plenty to discuss. I want to hear your views on all of this. 0344 499 1000. Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch, including Barry, who says, take away the incentives and then the Navy wouldn't be needed. It's infuriating, says Barry. Lots and lots of people who have been in touch on this, including Scott from Fife, who says, my wife Karen has said, why couldn't they put all the illegal immigrants and the outdated visa immigrants get out on a remote Scottish island? They would be allowed 3 meals a day and basic doctor until they said where they're from, and then we would deport them. Also, if they wanted to appeal, they could pay for a lawyer, not us, says Scott in Fife. Scott the Scot. Lots to discuss with all of that, but actually what I want to talk about now is the Unite conference, this huge union voting overwhelmingly to re-examine the relationship with Labour and to suspend Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, of course, from Unite membership over the Birmingham bins dispute. This has been going on for 6 months and has caused misery for so many people in that area. I want to talk to Ed Lennox, who is the Director of Operations for Clean Up Britain, and also Councillor Robert Alden, who is the leader of the Conservative group on Birmingham City Council. Ed, first of all, maybe I can chat to you first of all. Just give us a sense of the scale of the problem here.
Well, I mean, I was actually talking to somebody this morning who's from Birmingham and said that it's just, you know, the city is being completely held to ransom by the union. I do understand that there are pay differentials. There's a lot more to it than most people are aware of. However, what it does prove is that if you want a job done properly, you don't get councillors involved because their ineptitude at putting the city in a situation where they can be held to ransom by relatively few people with no plan B is kind of symptomatic of the way that we fail completely as a nation to deal with rubbish, litter, fly tipping and all these other things. And I'm not trying to conflate it, but it is just a symptom that you should never have a situation where a few people can hold a whole city to ransom, leaving rubbish on the streets for week after week after week. You should have at least 2 suppliers so that one can step in if the other one lets you down. That's what the commercial world would do.
I think that's a fair point, Robert, don't you?
Well, of course, what the background to this is the bankruptcy of Birmingham City Council by the Labour administration, and Ed's quite right to highlight the total mess they've made of this situation. £760 million liability, and the council have known for 8 years that they needed to fix this contract, putting all the staff on the same contract, and have been dishonest with staff, frankly, and allowed residents to have to sit in up to 25,000 tonnes of uncollected rubbish over the last 6 months.
It's misery for so many people who have been dealing with that. We've heard from people on various occasions about living in Birmingham. From your perspective, Robert, what are your constituents saying to you, and how are they getting rid of the rubbish? How are they living hygienically?
Well, residents, of course, are saying how much they love Birmingham but hate the Labour council here in Birmingham. And we're seeing blocks of flats having to pay private contractors to come and get rid of the rubbish, which the council's failing to do. And of course, with councillors, we've been helping local residents trying to get rid of it ourselves, taking it down to local tips, helping them arrange collections where it's not being collected. But it all comes back to this failure of leadership from the administration, where they've known for 8 years that they needed to get a grip of this situation. Frankly, have been misleading staff by claiming that there wouldn't be a pay cut, and misleading the residents of Birmingham by allowing 6 months of rubbish to build up on the streets.
It is certainly a real failure, is it not, Ed, of the basic thing that you think when you pay your council tax. I mean, picking up the bins is the #1 thing that you want to happen. Just give us an idea of the complexity here, Ed, and whether you think there's any end in sight for this.
Well, I do have a certain level of sympathy for the situation they find themselves in terms of these, I think it's 16 members of staff who are going to be asked to take, as I understand it, a substantial pay cut. But my other understanding is that almost no other councils have a similar role. So I think,
one might say the pragmatic thing would be if this is 16 members of staff and you're talking about presumably a relatively small amount of public money, just give it to them. Get the bins collected.
I don't think you should just give it to them. I think you should look for value for money, but you should certainly look for ways. I agree with that, but if they're effectively holding a council to ransom for 6 months, maybe the time has come to have some sort of compromise. I think compromise is always a good idea in situations like this. At the end of the day, Birmingham is now like a third world city or even worse, and we can't have that. It's time for the government to step in and shake things up. It's time for alternative contractors to be sought to clear up the rubbish. And as you say, this is another example where council taxpayers are being asked to fork out and nothing's happening. And the same is true of litter and fly tipping as well, because councils are under a legal obligation. At the moment, the council is in breach of the Environmental Protection Act 1990, Section 89, absolutely everywhere. So the question I have is, why is no one taking them to court to force them to clear it up? But the judiciary is all blocked up. So, the options are slight. This is a complete mess and a complete lack of leadership, as Robert says, both at a local and a national level. And it rather shines a light on the fact that too many people in positions of local authority leadership are happier to sit on their hands and do nothing because they're too scared to stick their head above the parapet and do something helpful.
Robert, you mentioned the historical factors here, but today, at this exact moment, if you were given executive power to solve this problem, what would you do?
Well, we published a plan right at the beginning of this strike of how to end it, and they needed to do this.
And what is in that plan, briefly?
Well, so we highlighted that we'd have made sure staff could get to work without being intimidated. So we had the issues where bin lorries for months couldn't get out of the depots because of the picket line. So those who wanted to work couldn't.
Robert, with respect, that's not dealing with the problem, because the problem is these 16-odd members of staff who have a role that doesn't exist in most other local authorities. So I agree with everything you're saying. People should be allowed to go to work, but that doesn't deal with the problem per se.
Well, let's hear.
So that's exactly why at the very beginning you needed to issue this ultimatum then, because the Labour Council have known for 8 years when they created this role, and as you said, Ed, it's not a role that exists elsewhere, that they were creating this mess. And they needed to bring it to an end to be able to end.
So what would you do to bring it to an end, as well as people being able to get to work, Robert? Tell us about your plan.
Well, as we've been clear, we would have put an ultimatum on the offer right at the beginning of this, instead of allowing rubbish to build up for 6 months. They knew they were going to end up having to be where they are now, where they're going to have to issue redundancies, and they shouldn't have allowed this to drag on for 6 months of a bin strike and 8 years of knowing this risk was there.
OK, thank you both very much. That is Ed Lennox, their Director of Operations at Clean Up Britain, and Councillor Robert Alden, the leader of the Conservative group of Birmingham City Council. Lots of people getting in touch on migration, on the doctors, on the interview with Jonathan Brash as well. Let's play a couple of voice notes just before the break, starting with Richard, please.
Morning, Pete. Richard from Birmingham. I'm sick to death of these stupid Labour policies. I'm sick to death of day after day just seeing this endless stream of boats. I was depressed when Labour got into power. I'm even more depressed now. 1 in 1 out. It's an absolute joke. Vanity, out of vanity, Keir, never hear Starmer cancel the Rwanda scheme, full well knowing that he knew it was going to work. If that scheme was reintroduced, or even if he'd have tried it for a few months, we wouldn't be where we are now, and probably be a little bit higher in the ratings. Keep up the good work. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks, Richard. Lots to discuss with all of that. Let me know what you think of what Richard says and all our other guests. So 344 499 1000. Carl has been in touch on the doctor strike in the NHS.
Hi, Peter. Regarding the doctors' strikes and Labour, they make me laugh, this government. When the Conservatives are in and the doctors are striking, the Labour Party are lambasting them for the waiting times going up in the NHS. They're always going to go up, because the doctors are all on strike. And now the doctors are threatening to go on strike now. Labour turning around saying, oh, the public won't be behind you. They're just panicking because they know if the doctors go on strike, the waiting times are all going to go up again. So the waiting times being bad before were nothing to do with the Conservative Party. They were basically down to the doctors going on strike and the pandemic, the fallout from the pandemic. Cheers, pal.
Thanks very much for your thoughts there, Carl. I appreciate them. Let's hear what Nick has to say about the interview earlier on with the Labour MP, Jonathan Brash.
Good morning, Peter. It's Nick Moore from Loughborough. In your interview with Peter Brash, the Labour MP, with whom I disagreed with just about everything, particularly made my ears prick up when he was talking about the threat of Russia and Putin's march across Europe, which is arrant nonsense. It's taken Putin 3 years not to take Ukraine, and this seems to me Labour just trying to look strong in protecting us on the world stage against a an implausible foe. I just thought that was worth pointing out. I'm sick and tired of hearing about the Ukrainian issue and the threat of Putin. Have a good weekend, Peter.
Nick, thanks very much for your thoughts there. Yeah, I didn't actually notice Jonathan Brash saying that particular thing, but I'm sure you're right. And I totally agree with you, Nick, that we've been gaslit by so many people saying Putin's coming for us, Putin's coming, and, you know, his march across Europe. He hasn't even got as far as Kyiv. OK, there have been drone bombs there, but not ground troops, apart from that feint that was there for some time. So I think there's a lot of scaremongering in all of this. I think there's a lot of overestimation of what Putin will do. He only has control of a fifth of Ukraine. I don't think he should have control of any of Ukraine, quite frankly, but this, as you say, hasn't even taken all of Ukraine, never mind Western Europe. So it's a very, very fair point, and that is the justification that is used on many, many occasions for our involvement in the war in Ukraine. I know I'll disagree with some of our military experts here, but Nick, I totally agree with you on that. So it was a very good point. I missed it. Thank you very much indeed for pointing that out. I appreciate your voice note. Really, really good. Thank you to Phil in Somerset, who says, great show as always, Peter. Putin is the least of our worries at the moment. There's trouble ahead with the migrant invasion that's happening now. What really gets me is the government has a can't-do attitude, full of excuses, and the general public cannot see this. If the government wanted and had the will, they could pass legislation to say legal aid is for British citizens only. That's Phil in Somerset there. Alison and Biller, oh, I read that out earlier. Stephen Cardwell Park says, Peter, so we're preparing for war. What when we are most probably letting our enemies in an open door, says Steve. And Alison says, what happened to the processing and detention centre at Sangatte or Calais or wherever it was that was part of the 500 million euros deal that the Sunak did? There have been thousands of immigrants on the French border for years and years, and it seems to me the boats are very convenient for Macron. I think you're right, Alison. I think he needs that flow to continue. I think the flow needs to come to the UK for Macron's internal political purposes domestically. Dave has been in touch as well and says, good morning, Peter. Why is it that any Prime Minister can't see how to resolve the migration issue? Stop all fishing licences, stop putting them in hotels, stop all the handouts, and the boats will stop. Until we do that, the problem will continue. Plenty more to come on this. Migration is the #1 issue you want to talk about this morning. This is my show, but it's your show too. You want to talk about it, we'll talk about it. We'll do that next here on Talk.
The other thing that concerns me about that, the narrative that I'm talking about now is one that you will agree with, I'm sure, and most people will, but it has, with the rise, and this isn't a criticism of reform, they've done incredibly well in sort of building the momentum that they have, but this unworkable scheme that they've got, it's very seductive, very attractive idea, you know, 4-point plan for stopping the boats, does not survive contact with political, diplomatic, legal, or operational reality.
thank you to everybody who has been sending voice notes in. It's dead easy. You just do it through WhatsApp. 0344 499 1000. Same way as you send a voice note to anybody else. Matt has been in touch on One In, One Out. This is what Matt says.
Peter, Matt in Hove here. Just a quick note on this so-called deal, groundbreaking deal, that the complete buffoon Starmer has agreed to. Clearly, any migrant currently in France that has links to the UK are not going to get in the boats. They're going to wait for France to send them over in exchange. So we are going to be keeping the majority of people that come over on the boats, hundreds and hundreds every week, and the small number that go back are exchanged for people that have got links to the UK. It's absolutely ludicrous.
Matt, I'm not sure with that laughter and that message. You're taking the Prime Minister seriously in all of this. I'm sensing a note of scepticism there. Matt, great message. Agree with every word. Pete the Mole has been in touch on how to stop the boats overnight.
The easiest way to stop these boats coming is to stop the draw. Stop giving them benefits, stop giving them anywhere to live, stop giving them anything, and just say you're never going to get citizenship of this country, and you watch most of the boats stop overnight.
Pete, thanks for your thoughts on that. Terry in Slough says, hi Peter, is there no end to this Labour government's stupidity? Anyone with an ounce of common sense knows this idiotic rush to net zero will be disastrous for Britain. Who's going to invest in our country with our energy prices sky high? And the absolutely stupid idea with the asylum seekers and illegal migrants, one in and one out policy. What a brilliant idea that was, I don't think. In my 76 years on this earth, this is the most useless, incompetent government I have ever seen. I wouldn't trust this lot to run a jumble sale, never mind this great country of ours. God help us with this bunch of clowns in charge. Brian says the only deterrence that will stop the boats is to stop the benefits, freebies and privileges they get when they come. If the UK give the immigrants the same level of support as they get in France, there is no reason for them to come unless it's with criminal intent. Until our government accepts this and stops the incentive, the invasion of young white men will continue and grow. Labour are in denial, including your guest Jonathan Brash earlier, says Brian. Tanya says, Jonathan Brash said that no migrant that crosses will stay, but their borders bill makes it legal for all to cross and seek asylum. Conservatives made it impossible for anyone entering illegally to claim asylum. Labour have vetoed that. Carol in Shoreham by Sea says, I am so sick and tired of hearing these endless, pointless conversations about devising systems to stop the illegals. Just stop all benefits, everything. The UK must not be expected to support the world's poor or its criminals. This is the main pull factor. They get the impression they will be entitled to a free life. Stop it all now. Thank you for your great shows, says Carol. And one more from Chris in Newbury, who says, Peter, illegal entry in the US southern border reduced by 97% in 4 weeks. It didn't need new laws, it needed new political will. Trump proves beyond doubt European Liberal politicians with their advisors, Tory or Labour, are utterly bereft of capability, will or human talent. Chris, that point about political will is really interesting. It was echoed by James Nation a little bit earlier on in terms of the political will to do that within the legal framework that exists already. And actually our legal expert, who we spoke to a little bit earlier on as well, he echoed that when he talked about that in his article in The Spectator. Amar Johal was talking about that as well. I want to talk now to Peter in Gloucestershire. Lots of people talking about migration, but Peter wants to talk about the doctors' strike, which is another topic we're covering this morning. Peter, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yes, morning, Peter. Well, the point I wanted to make was these doctors most of them are very young, and when they were training to be doctors, they knew what their terms of employment were going to be.
Yes, they did.
Now, some of them are sort of, I would call it blackmail, saying, well, if you don't give us the pay we want, we'll go off to Australia, New Zealand, Canada, wherever, and get jobs there which pay more. Well, they might pay more, but maybe there are other differences in the terms and conditions in terms of pension. Well, if I was, what's the name of the Secretary of State for Health? Stride, is it? Yeah, anyway, the government could make a list of all these doctors' names, saying these are doctors who are prepared to strike, put patients at risk, and demand higher wages. And then make that list of doctors known to the employers of doctors in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, etc., and say, if you really want to employ these people, feel free to do so.
It's not illegal to strike, though, and it's not. It's something that shouldn't people have the right to strike if they want to, Peter?
Well, yes, of course they can strike, but if you tell an employee that you're prepared to strike in order to blackmail your employer to pay you more, just say pay you more. Well,
they would argue. Look, I basically agree with you, Peter, but they would argue that this is a fair pay deal, that they have been historically underpaid, and they would say that it's not blackmail.
Well, okay. Well, it's not blackmail, but anyway.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think it is blackmail, but they would say it isn't. They would say it's their fair pay that they're entitled to. So, I mean, if you're sort of blacklisting them, if you're sort of saying, well, we're going to tell your employers, you know, is that fair?
We're not blacklisting. We're just informing their employers about what they've done, a part of their CV. Their CV is that they've gone on strike well, you're just informing your employees about the sort of person that they are. It's for the employers in Australia or wherever else to decide whether they want to employ somebody like that. So it's not blackmailing them, it's just making information available to the people who are going to employ them or that they're threatening to go and work for, wherever it might be. And then they might have to weigh that up and say, well, okay, we go to Australia, sit down for my interview, and they said, well, we've got your name on the list here, somebody who, having been paid for by the British taxpayer, you knew what you were going to be, your terms of employment were. When you got employed, you decided to go on strike and put the lives of your patients at risk. What have you got to say about that?
I would be very interested as well if people who've been, we keep hearing about, you know, the people who've just become doctors, they've just, you know, in the last 2 or 3 years, well, they haven't been historically underpaid. They knew what they were signing up to, as you correctly point out, Peter. So if they get a backdated, if they get a pay rise, or even the 22%, which has gone back to, you know, years and years, will they say, no, actually, I've only been here for 2 years, and do you know what? Actually, you, the taxpayer, have paid for my education, have paid the hundreds of thousands of pounds it costs to train a doctor over a 6-year course. And the fact is that so many of these doctors, many of them earn £100,000 plus. They're failing to read the room here, Peter, I think.
Well, yes, precisely. I mean, I have some connection with people who are in the medical profession, and I know what they think about it. They're not young doctors. They're ones who've done their
And what do they think? Are they less than amused?
They strongly disagree with what's going on.
Yeah, well, we've seen Lord Winston, for example, resigning from the BMA on this as well, the British Medical Association. Peter, thanks for your thoughts on that. Peter in Gloucester there. I want to go to Alan in Merseyside now about the migrants. Lots of people getting in touch about this. Alan, what are your thoughts? You're very welcome to the programme this morning.
Hello. Put up with me, please. I'm not very articulate. What it is, if instead of giving France £500 million, what they should be doing is offer to pay for all the small boats, as in fishing boats, small dinghies, everything, and pay for their lodgings, bait and fuel, and they will actually border the whole of the English Channel. No one will get past us. We just don't want them here.
Okay, so you think some sort of citizens' force, perhaps?
Some which?
So who would be paid for then? Where would they be paid?
The medical profession. Well, all I can do, just pay for their. Most of them will go. Just if you pay for the lodgings, fuel, and bait.
Okay, so you tell them to go back to France with some money in their pocket. Would you be happy with that?
I'm talking about pay the small boat anglers.
Yeah.
They will guard the channel, literally.
Okay.
They will not let them boats through.
Would you be happy with that as a taxpayer, though? Is that fair?
Oh, you mean the taxpayer is already paying £500 million?
Yeah, well, that's my point. Where does the money come from for this idea?
Stop giving the money to France.
Okay.
Get it back off France, and then just pay our own people to border the. If the government don't want to do it, we'll do it for them.
Okay. All right. Well, Alan, thanks for your idea and thanks for your call. I didn't think you're not articulate at all there. I thought you were very articulate. Thanks, Alan. Leslie says, if we have a migrant ready to be deported, will human rights lawyers try to prevent them being returned to France? Leslie, the answer to that, as we know, is yes. Thank you to Jane as well. Morning, Peter. Amazing show. I've just been listening to Jonathan Brash and how wonderful he thinks Keir Starmer is when he performs a U-turn. How many times did they call Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson or any Conservative Prime Minister out for U-turns? But when they do it, it shows they're listening. Absolute hypocrites. And how many times did they say inherited from the previous government? Many, many times. They've got to stop talking about this. They've got to start taking responsibility for the last year and how this country has been run. It's fine to say the last guys gave them a bad inheritance. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I think a lot of people think they did. But certainly, Labour have to take responsibility for what they did and what they have been doing over the last year. Leslie says no change in laws will happen with Hermer pulling the legal strings. I think you're probably right. Margaret says, I hope Starmer has a plan B because this pilot scheme will not work. Just stop giving them the incentive to cross the channel. Tell them if they arrive here, we will send you back almost 1,000 in 2 days. And still they keep coming, says Margaret in Birmingham. Well, thank you for your message, Margaret. One more. Mark says, I'm interested in learning what drives illegal immigration. What are your and Peter's thoughts It's across both Labour and Conservatives. Is it cheap Labour? Are they cash cows for the few? I think it's all of that. I also think it's many of the benefits that are here as well. So thank you to everybody for your thoughts on that. We've got another hour to go, plenty of time to get your thoughts on the air. You can give me a ring. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. And thanks to everybody who sent voice notes as well. Remember, you can send them on the main number 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk to Harvey Proctor in a second. Fascinating story about how a historical crime that's not a crime anymore prevented him travelling. Stay with us. Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk. Thank you so much for your company. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. We're going to talk to Harvey Proctor in a second, the former Conservative MP who was convicted of gross indecency in the 80s. Now, that's not a crime anymore. It was essentially because he is a gay man and he was convicted for sexual actions. He's now been told because of that conviction that he can't travel on TUI, which is one of the country's largest operators. We'll get the full story from him on that. So stay tuned for that in a second. Also, migration, the number one issue we're talking about today. Lots to discuss. 0344 499 1000. Do you think Starmer's plan will work? If not, why not? We're talking about Palestine Action as well. There are many protests going right across the UK today in favour of them. They were prescribed as a terrorist group last Monday. Lots to discuss on that. As I said, the numbers to call 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 1, and indeed tomorrow between 10 and 1. We'll have the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp will be joining us So stay with us here on Talk. The doctors' dispute is something we're talking about as well. The British Medical Association saying 22% isn't enough for their members. They were given that by Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, about a year ago, or less than a year ago, and now they're asking for 29.2% more on their salaries. Many junior doctors earn £100,000 a year. Yes, really. Mary in County Down has been in touch and says medical training should come with a 10-year binding agreement to work in the NHS. Those who break the agreement will be liable to repay medical training fees in full. It's nonsensical to spend huge sums training doctors for them to turn their backs on the NHS and take their very expensive skills on a mercenary hunt for higher pay abroad. Mary, I could not agree more with every single word of that message. Thank you to Peter as well, who says they may have come from war-torn countries, these migrants, but the last country they came through was safe, no ID, no entry. And Sue in Nottinghamshire says on migrants, James, your guest earlier, James Nation, says we need more places to detain illegal migrants. We managed to raise Nightingale hospitals in weeks. Why can't we do similar accommodation for illegal migrants? It's a very, very good point. Right then, I want to talk now about a very curious, strange story and an unfair thing that has happened to Harvey Proctor. Now, Harvey is a former Conservative MP. He is also the Private Secretary to the Duke of Rutland. Harvey, you're very welcome to the programme. Can you just talk me through what has happened to you in the last few days and what you posted on social media about? It was sent to me by a viewer and I was fascinated by it. Can you just tell the story of what has happened to you?
Good morning to you and good morning to your listeners and viewers.
Good morning.
I happen to be president of an organisation called Facing Allegations in the Context of Trust. Fact. It stands up for those who have been falsely accused, and I have been falsely accused in the past. Now, we understood that TUI have brought in some safeguarding issues for people travelling with TUI.
So this is TUI, the huge travel company. We have asked them for a statement in regard to this. But where were you wanting to go, Harvey?
Well, it's really a policy matter for now.
Okay.
I'm fully supportive of safeguarding vulnerable children. That's not the matter. What I was concerned about was what TUI's attitude would be to my past conviction in 1987. Effectively, they are banning those with historical conviction for homosexual activity from getting their services. That cannot be right. And therefore, I really wish to reconsider their policy and to amend it so that this does not happen either to me or to many, many others. TUI, of course, are very supportive of gay pride on their website. They are also supportive in their policies that they put forward for travel.
Okay, just give me a sense of why you were convicted in 1987 and what happened. Of course, it's not illegal now, what you were convicted of.
Well, in 1987, the age for homosexual activity was 21. For heterosexuals, it was 16. Inadvertently, I went with somebody who was under 21, 19, who was wired for sound by a newspaper and sent into my flat. I was a member of Parliament at that time, and the newspaper was trying to pull me down and use this chap as a way of doing it. On their own tape, he said he was over 21. Now, my lawyer at the time was a chap called David Napley, quite a famous lawyer. And he advised me that there was a lacuna in the law, another one, for homosexuals and heterosexuals. In a heterosexual case, if a chap thought the girl he'd gone with was over the age of 16 and she happened under the age of 16 and the jury believed him, he had a defence. In the homosexual case, there was no such defence.
So you would have argued at that point that you could have reasonably believed that that person was over 21 because he told you he was over 21?
Yes, he did. And that statement is on the newspaper's own illicit tape recording.
Okay.
It wired him sound.
Okay.
Secretly.
So in regard to TUI, they are saying that you and people like you couldn't travel with them because you had been involved with a 19-year-old who, of course, now any 19-year-old can legally take part in heterosexual or homosexual acts.
Well, effectively, that's the case. They say that given my conviction in 1987, cannot travel with them. Now, of course, since 1987, the age of consent has been reduced in the homosexual case from 21 to 18, now to 16. The gross allegations, the allegation of gross indecency in my own home, by the way, and consensual, that I was accused and pleaded guilty to in 1987, are no longer offences, and I can have those set aside if I so wish by what is called the Turing law.
Yes.
Effectively, what TUI are saying is that if Turing was alive now, they would ban him from flying. That can't be right. So I'm calling on TUI to revise their policy urgently once they have talked to their lawyers and their insurance company.
Okay, Harvey, we're just slightly struggling with the line on your phone, but listen, thank you very much for outlining that all to us. We have approached TUI, the tour operator, to see what they think about this. So Harvey Proctor there essentially saying that because he was convicted of a sexual act with a 19-year-old. It's now, of course, legal for 19-year-olds to take part in homosexual acts. It wasn't then, in 1987, that he's banned from TUI and people like him banned from these flights. That does seem to be a bit silly. We will find out what TUI thinks. We've emailed them and asked them for a statement and all of that. If I don't get it today, I'll read it out tomorrow. If I don't get it tomorrow, I will tweet it during the week. I'll make sure they have their right of reply on all of that. So that's Harvey Proctor there, who has been tweeting and messaging about that. Lots to discuss. But I should say there's still no response from TUI, but once we get one, I will tell you what it is. Matt is in Cheshire. Matt, I haven't spoken to you for a while. How are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, fabulous, Peter. It's about 30 degrees here today. It's amazing.
Marvellous, great stuff. And Cheshire's a beautiful county as well. Is the vista that you look out your window a nice one?
Yeah, it's. I live right at the top of a steep hill, so I can more or less see. You can see Manchester almost about 8 miles away.
Oh, excellent. That's great. That's great. What would you like to talk about today, Matt?
It's the question of the day, Peter. You were asking who's responsible for the migrant crisis.
Yes.
I would say the EU, Remainers, the Conservative Party, but mostly the Labour Party and their human rights legislation from Blair's era, because he began all this in the late 90s.
I think you're absolutely right. And actually, Amal, who we're talking to a little bit earlier on, he was essentially saying that the Human Rights Act is at the heart of all this, because there was Amar Johal, who we spoke to a little bit earlier on. I don't know if you heard that interview, Matt, but he was saying that, look, the legal framework and the fact that human rights law is basically the #1 bit of law and everything else is subservient to the Human Rights Act, well, that is why we're in this difficult situation.
Yeah, I mean, everything's been more or less designed to chip away at the rest of our lives since then. It seems it's come to the point where our lives don't matter, our standard of living doesn't matter, but people who are thousands of miles away in the distance, who aren't even here yet, matter more than British citizens.
And do you think Keir Starmer understands that in any way? Does he understand that what you're asking for, what I'm asking for, what so many people are asking for, is just put British people first? That's all we're asking you to do, Prime Minister. We're just asking you to put the people who were born in this country, who are loyal to this country, who've stayed in this country, who pay tax in this country, who work hard. All we're asking is for you to put us first.
This is the man that tried to overturn Brexit, the main protagonist in trying to overturn Brexit, which was the main reason people voted for Brexit was to lower immigration, and he was number one in trying to stop that. So he doesn't care what we think. He's just part of a small group of people that think that they decide what the rest of us, how the rest of us should live our lives. And it's time at the next election, Britain stamped its foot down hard and made the Conservative Party and the Labour Party realise that unless they get their act together, they're never going to be in power again for hopefully a generation or two.
Matt, thanks for your call. Enjoy the sunshine and good to talk to you again. Made some really interesting points in that raised. I wonder what Grace thinks. She's in London and has given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Grace, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Many things. I hope you're having a good Saturday, by the way. The corner a moment ago mentioned our standards of living, and I completely get that standards of living are difficult for some people around the country. Yeah. But I do think we ought to keep in mind that actually our standards of living, as compared to quite a lot of humanity, are pretty high. You know, there are people who, you know, don't have electricity at all in our world. There are people who don't have clean water at all.
If you have a fridge, you're in the minority. In the world,
and I think part of the issue actually is we see so many people on social media who are very, very well off, or we see adverts, and that can lead us to not appreciate necessarily so much what we have.
I totally get your point, Grace, but I suppose the point is that if you do have a certain standard of living that you're used to and most people you know have, I think basically everybody I know, for example, has a fridge, has running water, has enough food. We're in a situation where if there's a threat to that, or even a perceived threat to that, that people will start to worry.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think you're completely right. I think that it would be helpful, though, for people like the last caller and some others to keep in mind that we've got a lot to be grateful for. You know, I'm just grateful that we do have electricity and clean water. I don't spend money on lots of luxuries. I'm really grateful for things that we do have. And it's because we have a higher standard of living that some people are trying to come here. It's also partly that some people have been misled into thinking that the streets are paved with gold and that they're going to be able to make a ton of money. And one thing our government ought to be doing, in my opinion, is to have campaigns in places like Albania where gangs are telling people that they can get rich by coming to the UK.
They've done some of that. They've had some of those kind of campaigns to say, look, you know, actually they're not paved with gold. There are many, many problems that will be with you. But then the problem is that you can have as many of those campaigns as you like, but if you know someone, as you're going to believe people you know, if you know someone who's come to the UK and actually has received benefits, is in a hotel, for example, or has got a job, legitimate or illegitimate, and their life is materially better than it is in Albania or wherever else they're coming from, well, they're going to be influenced by that, aren't they?
I guess. I mean, I'm a weird social recluse who doesn't have enough friends, so I don't have much experience of seeing friends do different things and wondering if I can emulate their experiences. But you make a good point. But yeah, I think to have messages on social media in some of those countries, middle-income countries, where people who have experienced people trafficking, for example, can warn others not to try to come here, I think that's one thing that there ought to be more of. But I think that more broadly, it's inevitable, as has been often said, that some people are going to want to come here because we do have a higher standard of living, and because our world is very unequal. And I get that we're never going to make it completely equal, but in all seriousness, if our government wants to reduce the number of people who are coming here, they need to not only be thinking about what to do regarding the boats, they need to think seriously about addressing some of the ridiculous injustices that there are. I mean, for instance, people often talk about how upset they are that some money is given in overseas aid, but far more money is going in the opposite direction, because poorer countries are actually being exploited by international finance systems.
And often by their own corrupt governments as well.
Yeah, so what we need, amongst other things, whatever happens with the boats, we need our government to be working on stopping some of those injustices that are keeping some of the poor countries poor, because eventually some people might think it'd be better to stay where they are, you know, rather than trying to come over here. Otherwise, it is inevitable that people will keep on trying to come. You know, there was a conference recently where global leaders were talking about the international debt system, and the rates of interest on the debt of poorer countries is many times higher than the rate of interest that we have on our national debt.
Well, they are a greater risk. But listen, I totally get where you're coming from, Grace. Grace, can I just ask you something, if you don't mind me asking a personal question? You're a very confident and articulate person who can come on a national TV and radio station and make your points, but you're a social recluse. Why is that, do you think?
I don't think I am articulate, but thank you anyway.
Well, I think you are.
Thank you. I don't know. I have Asperger's and I lack social skills, and I'm worried about embarrassing myself in front of people who are immediately next to me. But if I embarrass myself on the radio, then I never get to see those people laughing at me. So
I've spoken to you on a number of occasions, Grace. You've never once embarrassed yourself. You've said things I disagree with, and that's fine, because we disagree without being disagreeable. That's okay. I really value that you ring in, and everybody else who rings in and texts in. I love hearing from people, as you know. But all I would do, I loved your points today, and I don't mean to be patronising in any way, Grace, but all I would say is maybe you should be a bit more confident in yourself, because I think you have a lot to offer as a friend for many people.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Okay.
It's very kind of you. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
You too. Good to talk to you, Grace. That was Grace in London there. We'll take more calls after the break. Stay with us.
The other thing that concerns me about that, the narrative that I'm talking about now is one that you will agree with, I'm sure, and most people will, but it has, with the rise, and this isn't a criticism of reform, they've done incredibly well in sort of building the momentum that they have, but this unworkable scheme that they've got, it's very seductive, very attractive idea, 4-point plan for stopping the boats, does not survive contact with political, diplomatic, legal, or operational reality.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including the tweeters. Let me just read out a couple of tweets. One from Angie, who says, as a nurse, I work very closely with excellent medics and have always supported them. Now I have no respect for the doctors that want more money. I and many others haven't had a 22% pay increase. One word, greedy, says Angie. Mutley Wheeze says, instead of paying France £771 million for doing nothing, how about us charging them £1 million for every illegal immigrant that lands here? How are you going to collect the money, I suppose, is the question on that one. And one more from Chris. He says, as a nurse, I would never strike. Plus, I knew the salary, the working time, how much studying I had to do. There's a new type now, trained in a different way, sometimes in another country. And another person says, your guests are making my blood boil. We remove migrants from the dinghies onto border force boats right now. We don't have to move the QE2 alongside. These people are the very reason nothing is being done. I don't care if it's war. Graham says, listening to the nonsense of commentators who for some reason believe that the law in the UK is static. Parliament, if it wants to, can enact laws that make blocking boats, turning them back, or putting immigrants on Navy ships perfectly legal. Well, thank you to everybody who's been in touch on Twitter. On text as well, Leslie says, please can you ask if migrants throw the documents overboard, are they given false IDs if they're given leave to stay? Diane Park from Huddersfield says, Belgium and Denmark have sea borders, but they've put a stop to immigration. And and Steve says, I would never have thought our Navy would have pulled a health and safety card. Yeah, but they don't want to kill people and then, or injure people, or someone drowns and then they're held responsible for that. I can understand that. Jill is in Cornwall and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Jill, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Well, it's very, very difficult. I find it very difficult to control how I feel about the situation. There are so many people in this country that feel that we're being taken advantage of, not only by other countries and people like France and what have you, but also by this government that have their hands on everything that's happening to this country. And I get irritated with people that come on to the show sometimes and talk about why people come here because we have all of this and they would what we've got. We have paid highly and we've paid really a lot over the years for the state of this country and the way people are and what we have. And when you think that people will work flat out for 60 odd years, end up with very little other than maybe a home and somewhere to go, and then you get people floating across the channel. I'm not saying that all of them are awful, are criminals, but a lot of them are, and they mean no good to this country at all. Yeah. And we've got a government. I'm sorry, but I don't think that Keir Starmer gives two toss. I don't think he gives
two hoots.
Thank you. What happens to this country? I don't think he likes this country at all. If I'm honest, something about the way he behaves makes me think he's more an enemy of this country than.
I've asked a number of people this question before this morning. Just finally, Jill, can you think of anything positive Starmer's done over the past year? Yeah, I mean that says it all, Jill, doesn't it?
No, I can't. I really can't. As much as I might try, I can't. Okay. And every day it gets worse. Yeah. And I wish sometimes that he would stand in front of that microphone and he would tell this country why he has decided that it should be doing this, this and this, and stand up for how he's behaving, because he doesn't give two tuppenny thank you hoots about the people in this country. I'm sorry.
Jill, thanks for your thoughts. I appreciate them. That's Jill in Cornwall there. Lots of people getting in touch, and we are going to take many more calls between now and 1 o'clock. But for the meantime, I just want to talk briefly to Jake Wallace-Simons. He is author of Israelophobia, the newest version of The Oldest Hatred, and what to do about it. There's a couple of things I'd like to talk to Jake about. One is the negotiations between Israel and Hamas, apparently on the verge of collapse. We'll talk about that in a second. But first of all, here in the UK, Jake, you know and I know that, of course, there are Palestine Action protesters and supporters of that now banned and proscribed group in London and Manchester, in Glasgow, and indeed in Londonderry in Northern Ireland, who will be protesting in favour of them today. This is a proscribed group from Monday midnight. What's your reaction to that? And should we be calling these people who are holding up signs and protesting peacefully, essentially arresting them under terrorism legislation?
Well, whether or not you agree with the fact that Palestine Action has been proscribed as a terror organisation, the fact is that it has been now, and that's the law. And so we can't pick and choose the laws that we follow and those that we neglect, because that way madness lies and the collapse of society. And so people who are demonstrating, fine. But if they're expressing support for a proscribed terrorist organisation, there has to be consequences. And those consequences, I'm afraid, do need to be quite robust in order to enforce a deterrent against other people supporting terrorist groups. Because once people support Palestine Action without consequence, then people might want to support Hamas and expect there to be no consequence either, or Hezbollah, or ISIS, or whatever.
Although we know, of course, Jack, that many people have done that at many of those protests in London, and there has been no consequence for them.
Well, that's right, and there should have been. And I think part of the reason we're seeing such chaos now is because there hasn't been consequences earlier. If you want to have a law-abiding society, then for those who break the law, there must be serious consequences. Otherwise, you might as well abandon your country as a joke. And the fact is that they don't agree that Palestine Action should be a terrorist organisation. That wasn't the view that prevailed in government and in Parliament. We live in a democracy. That's the law. They've got to obey it or face the strength of the law.
I wonder if we can talk briefly about Pascal Robinson Foster. Now, Jake, I'm sure you'll be very sympathetic with him because he doesn't want his name, Pascal Robinson Foster, to be well known. So if you could avoid saying Pascal Robinson Foster, who is the man in Bob Villain, and just in your answer, if you could just not say the words Pascal Robinson Foster, I'd be very, very grateful. He has faced absolutely no legal consequence for shouting death, death to the IDF.
That's right. In fact, Peter, I think I won't say the name because I don't want to have to wash my mouth out afterwards. But this man, yes, I mean, he was the one who sparked this horrendous trend of chanting death to the IDF, which has now been taken up all over the world. It's an approximation of a jihadi phrasing of an Arabic chant, death to something. We don't normally say that sort of thing in Britain. And he started this trend. He obviously should be facing consequences because otherwise, again, there'll be a contagion of this sort of inflammatory rhetoric. And suddenly we'll live in a country where people can call death to whatever, and for that to be fine. You know, we do live in a country where we have free speech, of course, but there is a line, and that line is at incitement to violence. And if you're calling death to something, I can't think of any more clear incitement to violence than that.
Let's speak about somewhere where there isn't free speech, and that's Gaza. Negotiations between Israel and Hamas in Qatar on a new ceasefire for Gaza and hostage release are on the brink of collapse. I just wonder, I mean, you follow these things very, very closely, Jake. What is your assessment of whether a ceasefire could be coming? We've heard about it for a week, so it's close, and it doesn't seem to ever get over the line. And in fact, the BBC reporting and others as well that it could be close to collapse.
I think it's very difficult to tell what's going on moment by moment because there's so much at stake on both sides, and there's so much misinformation coming out from the Hamas side, and also you know, the media messaging is part of the negotiation strategy from the point of view of the White House as well. And so it's difficult to know what really is going on, and it's such a fast-moving situation. I think ultimately, in the bigger picture, the war is going to be coming to an end at some point in the not-too-distant future, because Hamas is on the verge of collapse. You know, I was speaking to somebody just yesterday, talking about how in one area of Gaza, which has been very highly contested, they've had a battalion there that's gone through 4 different commanders. Each of them have been killed one after the other, and the latest is only 19 years old. I mean, that's the bottom of the barrel that they're scraping. These poor kids who are brainwashed, given their Kalashnikov and forced to fight to the death to the Israelis. It's a horrible way to live. Hamas is an evil organisation that's so damaging to the Palestinian people more than anybody else, as well as the Israelis, of course. But yeah, we are entering, I think, the end game. Israel needs its hostages back. Hamas wants to keep them, and that will decide the outcome.
Jake, thank you for that analysis. Jake Wallace-Simons there, author of Israelophobia, the newest version of The Oldest Hatred and What to Do About It. Thank you to him. Loads of people getting in touch on migration, including Dave, who says Macron blamed the UK for the pull factor and why the migrants are crossing. Why are the migrants crossing, Emmanuel? Macron could have agreed to have taken the migrants back, not on a one-for-one basis, but just taking them back anyway, which would have in 2 weeks completely stopped the activity of crossing the channel. Well, thank you for that. Thanks also to Tristan in Southend, who says Peter is totally correct on the doctor strike. They have had a massive pay rise, and furthermore, people on benefits got a 9.1% rise 2 years ago. I wish people would stop virtue signalling and moaning. Time to be grateful for and live within our means. People will die. Doctors, do your job. And Teresa says this government should have a chat with the Polish government on how to safeguard its borders. No rule out the red carpet required. Poland has recently deployed the military on its Lithuanian and German borders to prevent the dumping of the illegals by the said countries. Moreover, ordinary folk joined in droves too. Superb show, says Teresa. Well, thank you for that. We're going to talk in a second about a big development in regard to the Air India flight. We remember this a couple of weeks ago. It barely had taken off until it crashed, and many, many people, in fact, every single person apart from one on board, died as a result of that. We now know a bit more information in that the fuel switches were cut off before that crash. Families are asking, was that actually avoidable in regard to the crash? We'll hear from an airline journalist, former pilot and author of a book called Why Planes Crash in just a second. If he doesn't know about this, I don't know who will. Stay with us here on Talk. Thanks everybody who has been in touch, including Dave in South Gloucester, who says this dopey scheme, one in, one out, cooked up by Starmer and this Machiavellian mate Macron, is at best numerically status quo, but has the distinct possibility of resulting in an increase in the number of migration population. When you consider that all of these migrants with tenuous links to the UK will bring in hordes of dependents. It's a gaslighting scam and will not deter people and will not reduce the number of illegal immigrants coming here. Andy in Alicante says there are so many steps governments could take to curtail the illegal immigration problem. They don't actually work and they don't seem to want to do anything that might actually work. Arrest and custody pending trial for breaking immigration law, detention on floating prison ships, the Navy preventing physically boats entering the UK waters, all legal actions. The latest one in, one out, 17 plus in this latest preposterous plan designed to fail. The question must be asked, why will the government not take any strict action? Why? We are asking that question, Andy. We're asking it this morning. We're not getting answers. And I mean, I asked Jonathan Brash about this. There's a lot within the law that could be done. James Nation, former head of policy at number 10 Downing Street, was talking about that a little bit earlier on. We'll continue to discuss these issues. We'll get a reaction from you. There are plenty of people calling in. If you want to get your voice note on the air as well, remember to send that in. 0344 499 1000 is the number for both. I want to talk now about the fuel switches being cut off before the Air India crash. This was the crash in Ahmedabad a few weeks ago, and there were, of course, many hundreds of people who died, both who were on the plane and indeed on the ground within that. And a preliminary report on the Air India crash, it killed 260 people in June, finding that both fuel control switches were in the cut-off position, a step that turns off the engines moments before the plane crashed. Audio from the cockpit, detailed in the report, suggests confusion between the two pilots. One asks his colleague why he did the cut-off. The other pilot replies that he did not do so. Well, Terry Tozer is an airline journalist, a former pilot and an author of Why Planes Crash. Terry, what do you make of this?
Well, it is a great puzzle, isn't it? So far as I can understand, these switches are protected, and so you can't knock them off by accident, or at least as long as the latch mechanism that protects them is functional. So it would appear that they were selected off one at a time, first number one, then number two, which of course cut off the fuel to both engines. They were almost immediately restored again back to the run position, which initiates an engine relight sequence automatically, and that worked. And both engines were beginning to fire up again, but they didn't have enough time to become effective.
And certainly there are many, many questions more that this raises, the families themselves saying that this was avoidable.
Well, most crashes are avoidable, and there's usually a multitude of factors that combine to cause something like this. But this one is really, really unusual. I mean, as you said, I've written about many, and I've not come across one quite like this before. The implication is that somebody did this deliberately. There is a notice that's referred to in the accident report from Boeing saying that on some of their models that use these switches, it's possible for the latching mechanism to become disabled, and that they issued an advisory that this should be rectified. They don't make it mandatory, but even if the protection were missing, it's very hard to see how these switches could have been set to cut off at this point in flight. No sane pilot would do that.
Yeah, well, plenty more, I'm sure, that will come out of this. It's just a preliminary report. We still have no response from TUI, the travel company, just in regard to what Harvey Proctor was telling us a little bit earlier on, the former Conservative MP, saying that he and others like him are banned from TUI because of a 1987 conviction for gay sex with someone who was 19, and now, of course, that's legal. Terry, what do you make of this well, what do you make of this story? And do TUI have a point? Does Harvey Proctor have a point? It seems to me a bit strange that something that's not illegal anymore could actually prevent someone travelling.
Yeah, I mean, I've only just heard about this, and I think you'd have to know a lot more about the background, whether there's been any interaction between TUI and the man concerned. I mean, basically, any airline is perfectly entitled to decline to carry whoever they want. As for the reasons why they would do that in this case, I have no idea.
Well, we'll hopefully find out from TUI. Still no response from them, but if it comes during the show today, I will of course bring it to you. If it comes during the show tomorrow, I'll bring it to you, and if not, when I'm off on Monday, I will tweet it out. Terry, thanks for your thoughts on all of those matters. That's Terry Tozer there, who's airline journalist, former pilot and author of Why Planes Crash. Thank you to Tad in Cambridge, who says the Chernobyl nuclear accident in 1986 taught us one thing: fallout does not respect borders. It travels far and wide. My 6-month-old daughter had a really dark suntan afterwards, so when politicians glibly talk about nuclear war with Russia, they really get on my wick. Nobody could ever win such a thing, so we need to negotiate like our whole world depends on it. There are safer ways to remove tyrants like Putin. Todd also says, I always enjoy your show, Peter. It's absolutely unmissable, yet there are times when contributors leave me decidedly uneasy. Khaled from Leicester, for example, what he said seemed to resonate with some very dangerous Islamists, and that could have serious consequences for everyone further down the road, says Tad. I just think, I agree with you, Tad. We are the home of free speech, and people are entitled to say what they want within the law. I don't think Khaled was inciting anybody necessarily, but I did absolutely fundamentally disagree with what he said. Tad, thanks for your messages, really appreciate that. Thank you also to Craig in Staffordshire, who says if the illegals and the smugglers see that boats are being stopped and destroyed before taking off, then any that manage to leave the shores are escorted back. They'll stop coming to France and disperse from the camps along the shores. Surely that would be the win-win agreement to make with Monsieur Macron. John says, what would Trump do? Well, Trump has not directly addressed the UK Channel crossings. His US policies suggest he would advocate for militarised border controls, rapid deportations, third country agreements, stronger legal penalties and fear-based deterrent. These could influence UK policy through transatlantic policy diffusion, but their success would depend on UK legal, political and logistical realities. Phil in Bournemouth says, great show as always, Peter. Thank you, Phil. With this deal with Macron, 50 in, 50 out, because our human rights lawyers are not letting 50 in, 50 out, because of our human rights lawyers not letting any to be returned. What's to stop Macron sending us 50 a week regardless, saying they will will accept 50 back if you send them. Ronald Wood in Newcastle upon Tyne. Peter, I'm of the mindset that Keir Starmer is trolling us all now with that utterly pathetic deal with the deeply unpopular Emmanuel Macron and the illegal migrants in the English Channel. Loads of people want to talk about migration. Lots of calls coming in. If you want to add your thoughts to it, give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss here on Talk. We'll do that between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us.
The other thing that concerns me about that, the narrative that I'm talking about now is one that you will agree with, I'm sure, and most people will, but it has, with the rise, and this isn't a criticism of reform, they've done incredibly well in sort of building the momentum that they have, but this unworkable scheme that they've got, it's very seductive, very attractive idea, 4-point plan for stopping the boats, does not survive contact with political, diplomatic, legal, or operational reality.
Thanks everybody who's been in touch, including Francis in Sussex, who says the reason that the Labour government are saying about war with Russia is so they can postpone the next election by saying we're on a war footing. Terry in Birmingham says some areas of Birmingham, including mine, are having bins emptied but not recyclable, so it's all going in. We have agency workers, don't know why, but most factories now employ agency workers and have an iron grip. The unions have been neutered. Councils should do the same, says Terry in Birmingham. Well, let's go to Birmingham, and Tina has been in touch. Tina, what is it like there in regard to where you're living? Is your rubbish being collected at all?
Every week.
Oh, okay.
We've had late collections, but that's few and far between. The only thing that's not being collected has been stated by someone else, is our recycling.
So your recycling hasn't been collected, but presumably you're getting that lifted anyway, just with the normal rubbish, are you?
No, I actually can take mine to the tip.
Okay, so it's not too bad then for you.
No, it's not. No, but what's annoying is they're moaning about paying them this money, but they're paying for consultants at around £1,100 each. They've got agency workers in.
Yeah.
Why are they doing the pay cuts? Labour have known about this issue with the equal pay for God knows how many years, and it's their own fault.
Yeah, yeah.
And they cannot do what they're doing now to justify, as far as I'm concerned. I'm behind our bin men, 100%.
You're behind the bin men. And do you see any end in sight for this, Tina?
It doesn't look like it at the moment with what's been happening lately, but let them carry on.
Okay. Do you think you'd feel the same way if your bins weren't being collected, Tina?
There have been times where they weren't collected and I was still behind them because I understood it.
Okay.
It's a lot of money to lose.
Yeah.
Nobody else would take an £8,000 pay cut. That's nearly £700 a month. In some areas of Birmingham, that's your rent.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Okay.
So,
really interesting to get that
don't
perspective,
understand
Tina. Thanks for calling in. I really appreciate it. That's Tina in Birmingham there. Jess in Dover says it feels like gaslighting for Labour has become so bad it should actually be called trolling and that they're enjoying it. Stephen Millings in Belfast says, since Starmer's announcement of one in, one out, we have invited another 1,200 illegals. It's all going so well, says Stephen. He also wishes me a happy 12th of July. It is, of course, the 12th of July today, and the Orange Marches are happening in Northern Ireland and indeed elsewhere. Colin says, good morning, great show as usual. I appreciate your show allows arguments for any sides. We've yet to hear anyone who's agreed with the one in, one out argument. Have you had any, or have I missed any arguments? No, you haven't, Colin. Not a single person who has rung me in the last 3 days since this was announced has said they think one in, one out is a good idea. Not a single person, Colin. If you are that person, you've got 11 minutes to get in touch. 0344 499 1000 or give me a ring tomorrow. Neil says, why are doctors not aligned to the military police who are not permitted to strike? That's a very interesting point, and one I've heard before, but nonetheless worth bringing up. Paul is in Nottingham and has given me a ring about the doctors. 0344 499 1000. Paul, you're very welcome to the programme. What do you make of this strike?
To be honest, I don't think they should have it, but I really think we're missing a cunning plan here. What we really ought to do is pay them what they want, which will keep them quiet for a while. Hopefully we'll leave it another 10 years then before we give them a pay rise. And if the majority of the country back the doctors, it will show that the government just shouldn't be in power.
I'm not sure I quite follow the logic of that argument, Paul. You're saying give in to them and then they'll go away for 10 years. No,
do that because they've been bleating that they were underpaid for 10 years.
Yes.
Get a pay rise.
Yes.
Well, pay them what they want now and let's do the same again. At least we'll get them back in work for a while. And to be honest, it wouldn't be very popular, but if it costs the government more money, that's cracking. Because at the moment, we need this government out. And if the finances keep getting worse and worse, we might get them out sooner.
So you think it actually make things worse for the government, make the government less popular than they already are, and more chance of them coming out. But I mean, look at the polls at the moment, Paul, and you see that, it looks if there were an election held tomorrow, the government wouldn't survive.
You're right. And I suppose we're all hoping, or a majority of the companies hoping, that reform will actually come through and can keep their act together, if you know what I mean, don't you, to do so.
Well, there are 34% in the polls already, so they certainly...
And regarding other MPs and things joining them, well, they're going to need them, aren't they? Irrespective of who they are, just for their knowledge and the way the system works. We can always wheedle them out later, but if you've got nobody standing, you're not going to get that seat.
Very interesting points there, Paul. Thank you for that. Jeff has been in touch and says, let's not forget that people France sent here legally will then get to bring their families once settled. Barry says, when I was in the military, if you wanted to leave early, you had to pay. It should be the same for doctors to compensate their taxpayer, echoing the point that Mary made there a little bit earlier on. Mark in Croydon says, I say let them strike and watch the support from the public continue to drop. It was already dropping under the Tories, but Labour were yapping away about get round the table, but now even Labour can't speak up in support of them or find a table to sit at, says Mark in Croydon. Tim says, the wife's had a crazy idea, put a floating fence on our maritime border. Leslie says, funny how no migrants unhappy with her treatment and benefits in the UK get on a boat to go to France for a better life. Max in Warwickshire says, it's the unions, they are flexing their muscles by showing their power and control over the weak government. It's the 90s all over again. Flood the UK with cheap labour for the low earners, says Max. Jean says the King has plenty of land. They could build some detention centres. They could start today. They managed to do things urgently when there was a pandemic. This is the national security emergency. Everyone knows it includes members of Parliament. Leslie says if doctors' pay is so bad in the UK, why do many foreign doctors choose to come and work in the UK? Very, very good point. Thank you to Sadia Salim in Market Harborough, who says, I'm a born and bred Londoner, last year I left. The green leafy road I lived on for 25 years changed. Everything became difficult and dangerous, from driving, parking, traffic getting worse, schools, crime increases, social housing, houses of multiple occupancy, neighbours thinking it's fine to have all-night parties lasting days, daily till very late, fireworks going off at 2 o'clock on weekdays, no consideration for anybody. That is what Sadia's experience has been. And Matt in Hove says, we can disagree without being disagreeable on the show, almost up there with the migrant numbers. Great show, says Matt in Hove. Yes, I've said it a couple of times today. Grace sounds so lovely. Say hi to her from Wales, says Kim. And Rob in Sussex says, Grace is always superb. She delivers her points far better than I can, says Rob. Well, Rob, give me a ring and find out. I'll be the judge of that. I'm sure you can deliver your points very well indeed. And final one for the meantime, Peter in Croydon says, it's so refreshing to hear people like Grace admitting to the world and to yourself the person she really is. It's really brave. Sadly, there are very few Graces in the world, says Peter. Let's have a little bit more Grace. Derek in Manchester has been in touch on migration. Derek, what would you like to say? You're very welcome to the programme.
Hello, Peter. Yeah, you were talking before about we've got to be on a war footing with Russia.
Yeah, that's what the former head of the army has said, yeah.
Yeah, the reasons he gave were the fact that they've done cyber attacks and they're hostile towards us in other ways, you know, even though they've not threatened us officially. Well, on that basis and on the basis of the reasons given, surely we should now be on a war footing with France and the rest of Europe, because at the end of the day, they're actually sending across and they are encouraging in dinghies. You know, they're doing everything they can to get them over here, and basically most of the ones that I've seen do not fit in with our culture anyway, and probably dislike us intensely. So surely, on the basis that you said about being at war with Russia, we should be at war with France and the rest of Europe.
It's a reasonable point. I think a lot of people will agree with, and Derek, thank you for it. Thanks also to Sue in Chelmsford. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. The other thing, this one in, one out so-called deal. I mean, that is an absolute joke. If we accept someone that, according to France, is eligible to come here, and we take him in legally, then surely that gives him a right to fetch his mum, dad, his sister, his wife. Well, this is the thing.
Those family links as well, Derek, are something that is part of this scheme as well. So we'll keep a close eye on that. Sue in Chelmsford says, Peter, the only good thing Starmer has done for the country in the past year is ensuring more votes for Reform UK at the last election. Penny says, if that creep at Glastonbury had pranced up and down saying death, death to Muslims, death, death to black people, police would have been swarming all over him. I'm just sad that young people will never know what a great country this once was. Thank you as well to a person in Liverpool who says, how did TUI find out about Harvey Proctor? Isn't information protected under GDPR? Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point, but actually he has volunteered the information. The information's in the public domain because it was a sting by a newspaper back in 1987, but he's essentially saying that if he wanted to travel with TUI, that he couldn't, and this is a discriminatory policy. We've still no response from TUI. If we get it tomorrow, I will read it out during the programme between 10 and 1. Don't forget, that's coming up. David in the Cotswolds says, great show. I can't understand why Starmer thinks he can make a deal with France on illegal immigration into the UK. Macron has got rid of the 44 illegals this year alone. Why would he give up something which is favourable to the French voter? Graham Johnson says, so the 50 coming on the Starmer plan would be automatically legal immigrants replacing an illegal, so legalising illegal immigration. Thank you, Graham, for making it quite difficult to read that out. And thank you to Mary in Cyprus, who's been in touch as well. Mary, you're very welcome to the programme. I think you have some thoughts on immigration.
Hello, Peter. Well, I want to ask, these people getting into France, they presumably got passports, but have they got visas that are legal for them to be in France, to work their way up to Calais? Because people don't drop from the sky into Calais.
No, you're right, and they haven't. They would say that, you know, they're claiming asylum. They should claim asylum in the first country they come to, but they say they're claiming asylum, so they haven't got visas. No.
So they don't need.
Well, they're claiming asylum, so they are asking for asylum. They're asking for a visa, essentially.
Right.
What do you think of the one in, one out scheme, Mary?
Well, I mean, The arithmetic is as bad as the Chancellor's, isn't it?
Wow, that's a very fair point. Mary, thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate that. Let's go to George in Dundee just very quickly. We only have a couple of minutes left before the end of the programme. George, if you can say it quickly, tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, I will do 2 points. A lot of your commentators and callers always preface things by saying not all of these migrants are illegal. The very fact they are crossing illegally makes them criminals.
It is an illegal act. It is an illegal act.
It's an illegal act, so straight away they're criminal. The second point I like to make, Peter, I'm doing up my bedroom at the moment. Maybe spent about £800 on materials, a couple of £100 for my time. It's 25 degrees sunshine. I'm not my pan in here, eh? The illegal migrants, what are they worried about? Loafing about outside hotels that I pay for, wondering what's for their buffet supper tonight.
And that's not fair, George, is it?
Fair. It's beyond belief. The only way this one in, one out will work is if Starmer offers British people money to go to Australia, set up in America or whatever, because this country is going belly up.
George, thanks for your thoughts. That was George in Dundee there. Thank you to Brittany in the USA, who says, great show as always. I have to admit the Khaled's comments sounded really